Welcome to the Theory of DFS podcast. I'm Jordan Cooper, aka BlenderEd, Blender HD on Twitter. You could go to theoryofdfs.com. I'm the co-author of The Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports, 15-hour audio DFS masterclass at theoryofdfs.com. Join with me this week, special guest. I've been trying to get him on the show for when Eric was out, but now that Eric's back, he's like, oh, I have nothing to do because I'm quarantined in Canada because coming back from a live final, and then there's nothing else to do other than play short NBA slates. And I mean, sometimes do you play Madden Sims? Sometimes just for
Yeah,
just shits and giggles.
yeah, I do.
You know,
I've had like ups and downs with that, but at the very beginning, I'd say there were some people who were playing the Madden Sims. So like the way it works is they have like a depth chart on the site, and it shows you who's the starting quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and they're way different than they are in real life. So like at the beginning, I'd get people playing, and they were using like the real life running back ones, and they just get zeros, and eventually they'd figure it out. But like there's always like the 1 week of like the really harsh learning curve. Like there's no getting lucky in a simulation where you pick the backup and the starter gets hurt. So I do that. I do a bunch of stuff, but uh, um, yeah, the Madden streams are definitely up there for the craziest.
but it's Warren Kosoy, Bills fan 777, playing the Madden streams during COVID when there's nothing else going on.
Yep.
And if for the free play pools of what 10, 1,000 a first or 500 a first, but hey, it gave you something to do. I got into MMA DFS during COVID, so I get it. But you just got back from a live final. You're in Canada, so I'm automatically jealous of you because you do not have to pay income tax on your
Yes.
DFS winnings. So that drastically changes. Uh, I mean literally, like I had 1 year that like an entire bink goes to tax. Like I win $50,000 just for the sake of paying that to the United States government
Oh God.
for uh, I don't know what I get. What do I get with my tax money? I have no idea. So, do you think that's the number one like tip? Like, if you want to increase your profitability, should you just move to Canada?
I mean, I don't know how it works if you move, but like if there's no loopholes and you just have to become a Canadian, I think you'd have to revoke your U.S. citizenship in order to be able to do
I
that.
don't
But I,
mind doing it for DFS. I'll revoke it. I'll say it
yeah,
right now on this podcast. I revoke my American citizenship. Do I have to pay
yeah.
taxes anymore?
I mean, I mean, your whole thing is trying to make people money and get an edge. And I mean, if you can go from paying, what is it, like 40% on
No,
your win?
no, it's not. I'm not in that high of a tax bracket. 28
Okay,
between
so
between federal and state, and obviously I have a company, so I mean I'm able to deduct expenses, as a full time player and all the content stuff I do. So all my subscriptions and all the everything. I mean, there's ways to deduct stuff, but like for the normal person, it's not like a professional player. Like you're gonna pay whatever your tax bracket is. It's going on your other income, and that rake isn't 15% of the contest. It's actually higher.
yeah, and no, I was gonna add like it's basically we basically have like reverse taxes here because the U.S. Canadian dollar exchange. So pretty much we're getting like plus 25% when we withdraw the money instead of minus. So it's definitely a great perk to living here. And I'll coop up inside for a few weeks if it means I don't have to pay for my winnings.
So, Warren, you've been playing DFS longer than I have, but you're also significantly younger than I am. You've been playing since essentially it's been legal for you to play.
Correct. Yes.
Were
Actually,
you truthfully were you playing before technically you were 18 years old?
yes, but I only played free contests when I started. So here's how it started. I was in the back of my class in high school, in like grade 12, and I always played season long fantasy and I enjoyed it. And I saw like an advertisement for, you remember
Well,
draftstreet.com?
I didn't even start playing until after they were gone.
Okay. So yeah,
Like
so
I started just for reference sakes, I started playing about a week after Ethangate.
Okay.
So
Oh,
a week after all the when New York got banned, like all of that type of stuff, that's how I found out about it. Because remember,
right.
I didn't watch major sports other than soccer, and they didn't
Mhm.
have commercials on during soccer. I've barely heard of DraftKings, in just because you see there's still advertisements, but you don't know what the hell it's for. So like that like Wall Street Journal story, that like everything with that ownership issue, I'm like, oh, this is more similar to poker. This is more like a peer to peer game than some just like fucking bullshit challenge thing,
Yeah.
like with the high rake and whatever. I'm like, I don't want to do this. So like I started then, but obviously knowing what happened before then, like even now, like Warren, even now in 2021,
Hmm.
I think to myself, if I had the bankroll I had back in 2015, like I'd be a millionaire. And then I think in terms of how about the people that have been 2010, right? When like when Draft Street and uh, all the earlier sites came out. I mean, imagine you having the tools that you have now and the knowledge that you have now back then. I mean, essentially you'd crush the games.
For sure. Like, but I guess that's the thing. I remember when I started, I was very, very bad. Like, I was 18. I just love sports, and you'd play your season long leagues, and you'd be like, "Oh, that guy killed it for me in season long. I'm picking him tonight." And I remember like my first week in Draft Street chat, I was like complaining that Amari Stoudemire got a double double, and I'm losing all my money. Like I said, this is BS or whatever. And someone wrote, "You really don't know how this works, do you?" And then I realized maybe I have a lot of learning to do, but luckily I was playing like free contests. And then when it became legal, like a big night for me was like playing like 10, 15 bucks. And it just kind of grew from there. And I just liked it. I think the key to being good at anything is you have to either be like a workaholic or you have to actually really enjoy what you're doing in order to really go the next level to enjoy it.
Right, and you play like all the sports. You play like everything. I mean, being from Canada, big into hockey. So
Yeah.
I'm assuming just like me in soccer, you in hockey, like hockey is bigger than soccer on DraftKings, but not
Right.
that much. But really not that much bigger
Mhm.
as far as the prize pools are concerned. So did you get into uh, playing similarly to me with soccer with hockey, where primarily making most of your money and most of your experience early with like a niche sport and not in like football or basketball or baseball.
No, you're definitely correct on that. Like I would,
You also played soccer on occasion.
yeah, I watched your videos actually. I didn't know what I was doing, but you got to do what you have to do in this year. I had to find a way to keep myself busy during the day, and if I wasn't like trying to learn a new sport or just keep my mind occupied, you end up just playing video games or doing something not productive. So
But
I
but
think I
but back in hot but back when you start like picture 2013,
yeah
2014.
no, it was hockey. It was
Right,
hockey.
but I mean but the stuff that you know now, even in
Hmm.
hockey, like obviously like I don't play NHL DFS, but I know the basics of
Right.
essentially you're stacking lines, right,
Yeah.
from teams, like the just the aspect of correlation, the aspect of like, oh, everyone's gonna play the high total capitals, and you're gonna get leverage by playing a lower owned. Like, were you aware of those strategic, like the game theory of DFS back in 2014? Because I remember in the Dan Barbarisi Dueling with Kings book, that because he hung out with Beep I'm a Jeep, uh,
Yeah.
and to learn how to play, and he was playing NHL, and the main thing that I mean, and this is back in like 2014 ish when it was happening, where he was like, no, just you correlate, you play, in baseball, you're playing five guys from a team, you're playing, and a lot of people were not doing that
Right.
back then. Were you naive enough to like? Were you still just in hockey? Just I'm picking the guys that I like.
It was a bit of both. Like I always knew, even like growing up, like even in season long, like you draft like line mates. So like just growing up as like a Leaf fan, for example, anyone who watches hockey, like I knew Matt Sundin even when I was like 10, before I even knew what fantasy sports was. I knew Matt Sundin and Alex McGillney and Gary Roberts. I was like that line, they all work well together. So it was just always kind of engraved in my head that like if one guy scores a goal, the other's more likely to get an assist. So I always knew that. but I never really focused on ownership. I don't really now. I'd say I do a little bit, but not as much as, let's say, other people, especially in hockey. Yeah, I've pretty much mostly switched towards basketball just because it's more of an exact science. But I would say at the beginning, I had no real concept of game theory, and I just picked guys who I liked. And then I went through a phase of being like, okay, I know more than everyone now. I'm going to start doing this game theory stuff. And didn't really work out. I went back to just picking the players I liked, or not the lines I liked in hockey, and just whoever I thought looked good, and without worrying too much about how owned they were.
But even back then, in like 2014, 2015, were you building a model? Were you doing projections? Like 2020, it almost like even when I started in 2015, getting into soccer. Now soccer projections are like not the best to use. It's just so there's so few things. Like it's weird in soccer. Uh, the makeup of the team and the side that's on the field, like the 11 that's on the field and the team they're playing against and the formation and everything makes it so that almost anything that you analyze is going to be a small sample size.
Right.
And most of the scoring is goals and assists, which are highly variant. So it gets down to the point of well, they're playing a 3-4-3 now against a 4-5-1, but now they're not starting their normal striker, and they're not like what are you going back and you could do per 90s. There are rudimentary things for soccer models, but it isn't as useful as typically heavy favored teams have more possession, and teams that have more possession score more fantasy points. So
Right.
more of those guys, the better. In hockey, back in 2015, I mean, there weren't publicly available models that there are now. I mean, were you even considering that, or were you still going by an instinctual, like thinking in those terms, but not having, you're not doing regressions, you don't have Excel open,
Right.
half the time. Or did you? Because there are plenty of people that came in. I mean, we saw, guys that may not be around anymore that had the head start back in those days that crushed it because we didn't have sites like Roto Grinders, or I mean, Roto Grinders was around, but didn't have like projection models or anything that to reference, especially in NBA. Like you didn't have I mean, probably Wowie may have been around back then, right? Basketball Monster did some type of projections, and I know a lot of people just let me go to Basketball Monster, export the CSV, run, go into Excel, and okay, now I could optimize my lineups or whatever based on these projections. And seemed like 98% of people didn't realize to fucking do that, uh,
Yeah.
and you just crushed regardless. So were you when did that transition happen? Because I'm assuming in the beginning, at least the first year or two, you were still going by your projection model was in your head of
Yeah.
I know what I'm looking at. I'm looking at all these statistics, and I'm kind of coming up with what based on their salaries, what the best plays what normal people do, just
Yeah.
better than most people.
Yeah. I mean, I still kind of do it like that. I kind of do projections by hand. I don't like automating too much because I think it's hard to factor some stuff in through automation. But I would say at the beginning, and still today, it's like mostly in my head. So for hockey, that was my first one. I was always just watching games and seeing power play formations and seeing which guys teams are trying to get shots for. And now they do have stats for that. Like you can see who shoots the most on the power play per 60 minutes. Because the power play is where you get most of the offense, and 5-on-5 stats still matter. But I made the mistake a few years ago of valuing that a little bit too much. But let's say even for NBA, there's stuff you can watch and there's stuff you can automate, and I think it's healthy to have a nice middle ground between that. So I've never fully transitioned to just any automation. When I'm playing, during the season, I had to take a break from NBA because I do so much manually because I need peace of mind to know that I have every number the way it should be. My eyes aren't failing me because it's easy to watch games and then create biases and then just stick with them and keep making the same mistakes over and over. So
What are you doing manually though? I mean, for NBA projections, I would think the manual stuff is more of the like the minute. Like I can understand doing that manually,
Right.
but I mean, as far as like usage rates and everything like that, you're not doing anything historically for the, you're just. Well, I mean, how are you coming up with that number? I mean, like, how do you do that manually? Do you just
So,
ballpark it?
sort of. So what I do is every night, if there's any injury, I think that the first slate that news is there, the projection sites will usually get the key guys right, but they'll usually get the role players a bit wrong. So, for example, I'm trying to think of a good one. Last year, do you remember when Karis LeVert started going crazy when I believe it was either Kyrie or Dinwiddie that got hurt? I think it was Kyrie because he's usually the
Right,
one
and
who's
Dinwiddie was already out, so Dinwiddie was out for the season, right?
right. I can't remember the situation,
Right.
but basically, Karis LeVert's per minute stats were based on pretty much all of his minutes away from whoever was out was playing with the other guy who was also out. So the sites were using like an incorrect per minute, and they weren't factoring in that he was going to stagger and run the bench unit. And when I took off all the players and I put in who he was going to play with the bench, I saw that he had over a 40% usage rate and he was really inefficient. But he was like, that's like 8 to 10 minutes, a half of that. And he was like 4.5K, and he kept going up and up. And I think he got up to probably like 8 or 9 by the end of the year. But at the beginning, he was still like 30% owned, despite the fact that he ended up being, I was like projecting him as a 7K player, and the sites were slow to do that. So there's examples like that I do. And I just pretty much go through the rotations, see who's going to play with who. And then I use the Chord IQ on Roto Grinders, and I try and project per shift, and then I add it all up by hand. But like I do have like a good gauge of, so I'm not doing that for every player. I'd go insane. But like it usually comes down to like 20 or 25 guys, and I try and figure it out. So like even in the playoffs, there's certain guys like Damian Lillard was under-owned the first few slates because the projections were just putting a baseline per minute, even though he plays like the end of the first and third quarter for 5 minutes without McCollum and Powell, and that raised his average per minute for the game. So I end up getting like slightly different projections than everyone, and it just ends up creating natural differences, which I think is great in NBA. If you can have low ownership and feel good about it, I think that's the best way to win. But
I mean, how about in other sports though? Like in baseball, I mean, what you're saying is that what we're saying manual.
mm-hmm.
To me, it's you're still doing what anyone else would do with projections, because like for instance, in NFL, like in
Yeah.
NFL, you still have to you can't automate like target share, like
Right.
you can't automate. You could get the median number of plays, the median
Right.
number of like based on how these two teams play, how many running plays versus passing plays, the median, the
Mm-hmm.
average or mean or whatever, and then obviously they're going to be up X% of the time, so they're going to be running more versus passing more. But still, it comes down to like, well, you could predict X amount of passing plays for the Detroit Lions, but you still have to put down, is Marvin Jones going to get an 18% target share or a 24% target share or a
Right.
16% target share based on what defense they're playing, all those types of things. There's still a manual input even there. You're not just going to go by a 5-year average or something, or like Galladay is injured, but he's still playing. So it's like, well, what does that mean? Does that like how many
Yeah.
snaps is he going to get? Is the third wide receiver, is Quentin Cephas going to get the snaps, or is Marvin Hall going to get, like, those are things that like an actual automation for a model like won't do.
Right.
It'll take all of the, it's just like an NBA. It'll take your minutes and your usage,
Mm-hmm.
and then it'll go, okay, based on this, here's the projection for all the players.
Yeah.
Same thing for NFL. So like same thing for MLB. I mean, MLB, the number one thing you have to do for MLB projections is pitch count. Right? It's not right. You could go by a historical standard, but it's like, okay, Jacob deGrom's back. Is he going to pitch 95 pitches? Is he going to pitch 70 pitch? Like, if you're going to project him out for 108 pitches, like, you're going to have him in like 80% of your lineups. But if he only pitches 85 pitches, you're going to see that he's actually overowned, and you should probably have 0 of him. So like, just to say, I think people have this misconception in general about projections being like, oh, it's an algorithm. Like, I just plug in I don't know anything about the sport or anything like that. It's like there are manual inputs that you still have to do because based on today, if you were doing season long, you probably wouldn't have to because it's like you have the luxury of that large sample size of well if Galladay has a bad game today, well I drafted him on the scope of 17 weeks, so I don't really give a shit. But it's like
Right.
for daily, you need to know like what's his target share today? Is it going to go back to 25% or is it going to be Julio Jones is injured. Like, who's the wide receiver one on the Falcons? Right? You go and Julio's there, but he's been nursing a hamstring injury. And it's like, is that good for Ridley? Like, a lot of times it ends up being that Julio's in and it ends up being good for Ridley because he draws coverage. And then Ridley gets 12 catches, and everyone that played Julio at like 6,800 is sitting there going, what the fuck happened?
Exactly. No, I agree. There's a lot of things like that. And then when, let's say, Julio was questionable all week in that situation and then he ends up playing, no one will pick Ridley, even though it could help him depending on who they're playing. So I guess for me, like the projections kind of, like you said, it's like 75% of what you need. But I think the other 25% is like how otherwise everyone would just have the same team if that's all you needed. But like the other 25% is really what determines if you're going to win or not. And I do think you need to factor in the projections and look at them and not just ignore them, because sometimes you can just have complete oversights on players that you weren't even looking at if you had tunnel vision or something. But yeah, I think it's kind of like getting the notes of an exam like the night before, like getting someone's really good notes and just saying, yeah, I'll just gloss through those. I'll study them and then I'll plug them in the exam and we'll see how it goes. I think you need to have like a better understanding of why things are the way they are to be better long term. Like you can win many slates in a row or consistently for a while just by using projections, but I still feel like there are certain nights where like you need to be able to flip a switch and go beyond that, like especially late NBA season, like trying to figure out which teams are motivated to play guys and whatnot. And it's like that in every sport, like in hockey, football, week 17. There's a lot of those slates during the year, like let's say back-to-backs. Someone just had a knee injury 2 weeks ago. Maybe he'll play like 10 minutes less than he would have ordinarily. So, yeah, it's hard to just ignore either side, the manual part or the projections. But I think both are important.
I mean, what you're really doing there is exploiting the fragility of the projections.
Right.
Right. I mean,
Yeah.
really, what we're not talking about like, oh, I don't trust the projections that I have, either the model that you make yourself or subscribe to a site that has a good, reasonably. I think most content sites have reasonably good projections, like better than a layman can make themselves. So, like to me, that's a benefit in and of itself. But the fragility of like the unknowns of you're looking at like people a lot of times don't realize that they're looking at medians, they're looking at averages, they're looking at like the difference between okay if he pitches 100 pitches, yeah, he's vastly underpriced for 7,200. If he pitches 60 pitches, why the hell did you play him? But we don't know. There's a probability that one thing happens or the other thing happens, but that's for 95% of the players in the pool. It's not. You might as well just look at the projections. It's like nothing about their situation has changed, right? The guy that's batting third for this team is going to probably have 4 or 5 at bats against this. I mean, there's nothing. Not going to get pinch hit for or anything. There's going to be a basketball player that he'll play 32 to 34 minutes. There's nothing. That no one's out, and it's just he's 5,400, and whether or not he has an efficient day or not efficient day. Right, you have like Tim Hardaway Jr. Like you're sitting there going, like if the Mavs are all healthy or whatever, it's like yeah, I guess you could play him for that price or not. And if he shoots the lights out, he could be in the winning lineup. And if he doesn't shoot well, then he's getting a fucking snowflake. So,
Exactly.
but to predict what's going to happen on that specific day is probably fruitless because it's like nothing has changed. There's no fragility to that. It's just he's a higher variance player. So what you're doing is using the manual input, which everyone should be doing. It's just realizing the fragility. I'm doing the same thing, but I'm not watching the games. I'm just looking, going the same thing as you. Just okay, this guy is out, and everyone thinks this is going to happen. And I'm like, well, how often does that happen? Like we're gonna try to predict, especially in basketball. Like someone's out, and it's especially the first game that they're out, and you're like, well, who's gonna start for them? Who's gonna get the minutes in the second unit for them? Who's gonna close the halves? Right? Because we sometimes it's like you want the guy that closes. You don't even care that if he starts. And then
Right.
what ends up happening is that 15 minutes before lock, you get the starting lineup, and it's an unexpected starting lineup. It's like, oh, they're going to
Hmm.
start this guy instead, and we all predicted that. It's like, well, all the projections around the industry you're looking at are based around a different starting lineup, which then changes the shifts of like all the role players. So like those are the fragile situations of like if you didn't know basketball, if you didn't know these teams, like you're just a slave to like whatever numbers I'll put in 22 minutes and hopefully that's right. Like
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, but
Yeah,
still at the end of the day, that's like the last 5%. Like so many other people poo-poo projections that I don't have to look at them at all. And it's like I think you're significantly behind by just saying like I'm just going to go with what my eyes see. And it's
right.
like no, now I don't think you could win that way. I think you need some type of unbiased analytical model as a baseline, and then the extra 5% is the everyone thinks because Ibaka is out, Zubac is going to play a ton of minutes. Is that am I touching a nerve? Did that happen last night or something? I know you were complaining on Twitter about Zubac blocks not being credited, so I'm
Yeah,
assuming you had him, and then some other person played him. I read through Twitter, and apparently Zubac didn't play enough or something like that. But it's one of
yeah,
those things where you predict one thing, but it's not 100%. People are like, I think this is going to happen. It's like, well, maybe that's 70%, but 30% of the time this happens. And then when that 30% happens, they go, oh my God, oh, I had the hands in the air. Who would have thought this? It's like, dude, it's all probabilistic.
exactly. Yeah. No, the Zubac thing last night was I lost like all my 3-man contests by a point, and I saw him get 2 blocks in a row. I think the second one wasn't his, but the first one looked like it. So it sucks when there's a scoring error like that. But yeah, going back to what you said, I think that being able to think on your feet is important, especially when let's say there's a game that starts at 8, 7:55, completely different starting lineup than you expected. Projection sites aren't going to save you in 5 minutes, so you need to be able to have like this basic understanding, and that's why I like watching games too, because like sometimes I'll see something like even if a team's in garbage time, like if it's on, I'll just look at it for a few minutes, see who's handling the ball. So like let's say the last slate of the NBA season, all the Bucks were ruled out. Maybe it's a bad example because they were after a lock, but let's say that was 10 minutes before. I would have probably used Jordan Nwora because I saw one garbage time when I had like another player in a game against them. He was taking every shot for them, and he ended up getting like 60 on that last slate, and he was like a tenth of a percent owned or something. But yeah, there's always value to watching if you know what to look for. I think it's easy to watch the games and create terrible biases, but no, I agree with you that you need to factor in probabilities. Like even last night, there was one where Noel was off the bench and they switched Taj to a starter, and I saw that with the starters, Taj had like a 6% usage rate and 0.7 per minute. And even though Noel was on a minutes limit, he was a fantasy point per minute playing away from Randall. And I actually projected them around the same, and Noel ended up being 0.5% owned, and Taj was 70%, and Noel beat him by 15, I think. But I still cowered it and used Taj, but I had a bit of Noel. But like that's just another example of recency bias and people seeing that Taj had like 5 steals and blocks the games before. So even though there was no reason to expect that again, so there's always, especially in playoffs, there's recency bias, and I think that's another aspect you can exploit with people because the last few games tend to hold much higher stock than they should, I think, for people in general, especially in NBA.
Right, and you're bigger into NBA and NHL, but like in MLB, like
Mhm.
what's the recency bias there? To me, the recency bias is the pitching.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't played MLB too much in the last few years, but I did play regularly beforehand, so I can only speak to the days before they had the openers and all that stuff. Back when the pitchers just went 8 innings every game. But yeah, I'd say in MLB, the pitchers are like the closest thing that you can make an accurate projection for. And yeah, I think people will see a bad start and sometimes a bad start is you pitch great for 6 innings, then you walk a guy, hit a guy, and then make one mistake, and suddenly your great start becomes a bad one. So with pitchers, it's good to just look at long-term data and just trust that if they're
Except if you're Luis Castillo.
yeah. But I actually played an opening slate. I think it was him. He gave up like 10 runs or something, and I was like, okay, I'm quitting MLB again.
But you play everything as far as like cash versus GPP. Like
Mhm.
it's I'd consider you more unique than many other top players that like we have typically we have like I consider like three types of players that play of substantial volume.
Mhm.
Heavy cash. So
Yep.
like when you think of like someone like Empire Maker, like I think of like that style of one lineup, primarily three mans, head to heads, double ups. He'll throw it into the high stakes single entry, whatever, but it's still still a cash lineup. Then you have like Awesemo. It's like 150 max, Brick 75, Broflex, those types of guys, I play 150, don't play no cash. If they play the high stakes GPPs, it's like whatever their top lineup is, it's going to be in there. It's whatever. And then you have like what I call like the live final type of people.
Yeah.
Don't play cash games, but don't 150, but they primarily play like whatever, like the 777 or the Monster on FanDuel, and then like the live final qualifiers and like that, and that's their focus. You seem to play like you just seem to do all three at the same time. Like I'll see you you'll be in the Thunderdome, as well as having 150 lineups into the main GPP, as well as also have all your head-to-heads posted in the DraftKings lobby, and I'm like, how do you? I mean, I think you could play cash and GPP at the same time. Like, how do you do it all? Especially if you focus on one site a night? Like, I can't see doing all three, doing a live final qualifier, like a Thunderdome entry, 150 in a contest, and then do it on multiple sites, and like, because it's like all those games are different. Like the thinking between all those contests is so different from one another that you could automate. I mean, that I've tried to solve this by automation.
Yeah.
By essentially, I mean, we're in similar discords that essentially whatever the projection set that I'm using posts as the optimal median lineup is what I'm going to play in cash games.
Yeah.
Even though if I was quote playing, I would look and go, no, that's too high variant. Like I should switch it. But like now it's going to take 5 or 10 minutes of my time and my thought out of it. So like what I'm doing is like, I know I'm probably giving up a point or two of edge in cash games by not playing optimally, but still playing profitably over the course of a long, sample size. So just so I could focus more on GPP play. But how the hell do you do it all?
So yeah, like you said, 2 sites. Last year at the end of the year, I was playing both sites doing that, and it was exhausting.
Well, that's why I'm asking, because I've tried to expand to play DraftKings GPPs and FanDuel GPPs on the same day, and even that for baseball, for basketball, there's no shot I do that. Basketball is just stupid. I mean, even one doing one lineup on one site could be just chaos.
Yeah, no.
But in baseball, I mean, it's a little bit easier. But even then, like the sites are different, the strategies are different. A lot of times, if I'm playing baseball on both sites, it's almost like I'm rooting for two different things. Which is fine. But it's just like, okay, the strategy on DraftKings is to fade this team primarily and play these pitchers, and it's like, oh, the high-owned team from DraftKings is actually the low-owned team on FanDuel. So I'm actually I'm overweight on one site, and then of course I'm in chats with you, and people are calling. If you stack right, oh, I can't believe you played those chalk. Well, they were in chalk on my quote is always they were in chalk on FanDuel.
Yeah, exactly. I've always heard people who play both. They'll strategize oh, I have this guy on FanDuel. I don't need to use him on DraftKings, and then the guy might be 0.1 different per dollar on each site, and then the ownership is 40% different. But yeah, no, for me, I play the one site. I do one slate, unless I'm like getting crushed on the main, then I'll like play a bit on the late slate. But I focus on the one slate, and because I kind of do my projections kind of uniquely, I don't really separate who I use in tournaments or cash or qualifiers. Like it's all because like they're natural. I think that's the best way to play NBA is if you're naturally different and you feel good about it, you can join your thing in anything. Like in cash, like I don't care if my players are 1% owned. I don't care if they're contrarian. Like I don't care.
That's your project, right? Your projections say that's the best lineup, so who cares what anyone else thinks? You're just going, I believe over the long run, my
Yeah,
projections are better than yours.
exactly.
And if they end up being 2%, then that's actually a benefit to you.
Right. Exactly. Like I love the slates where I'm looking at it. I'm like, wow, no one's going to have this guy. And I love him. I don't like the slates where I'm looking, I'm like, man, this guy's 50%. On those slates, I play actually more tournaments, believe it or not, because in the cheaper ones, the cheaper tournaments, like the guys who are really obvious, like, you know, the 3K starting point guard who's going to have 30% usage and play 40 minutes that you don't have to play, but you pretty much do if you want to likely be at the top by the end. They'll be like 50% owned instead of 100% owned in cash games. So they actually matter a little bit. So I don't mind those. You pretty much have to adapt. But on nights where, you know, my ownership is likely spread out, I'm comfortable putting my lineups in literally anything. Like I don't differentiate any game type. So it's not any extra work for me to play each format.
So what are you building 150 and just putting like your top projected into the
Yeah.
one and the second projected into the other? I mean,
Yeah.
do you play all uniques or you just make a 150 set and that's it?
No, I'll do a 150 set and I'll put that in like the 20, the 5, the 6, and
Okay, so
whatever.
they're not unique. So I mean, if you have
Right.
if you have a lineup in the 20 max, it's also in the 150 max.
Correct. Yeah.
Right. So it's like the top you're using the top 20 like but most of the time I see that it's like the 20 max entries are basically the 1 through 20 top
Yeah.
projected or at least top something. Because you can
Right.
also do like highest ownership product versus the projected point. You know, there are you could make your own metric up in Excel and say that, you know, I want to put these lineups into these contests, but you're different than me that I play all uniques.
Right.
Right.
Well,
Like but of course I'm much more conservative. Like me,
yeah.
I care more about diversification than like the highest Eve. Like for the
Right.
likelihood, I just want to bink one of them. I don't need to
Right.
have one lineup that binks 5 different GPPs. It's like from a
Right.
long-term perspective, I'd much rather give myself more lineups. I'd rather play 120 lineups. That 20's in the 20 max. I have 80 in the 150 max. I have 10 in the knuckleball. And it's just like as long as first place, as long as no, my rule is as long as 10th place is higher than the number of entries that I put in, I'm
Right.
fine. And as long as first place in any contest I'm in is higher than my buy-ins,
Hmm.
I'm fine. Because what's the worst thing that you do? What on FanDuel, since I don't have the restriction yet because I never
Yeah.
played there that often, I could play in like the wiffle ball or the quarter or whatever, and it's like first place in those contests are like $750.
Yeah.
And it's like if I made unique lineups into that, you know, what was be the purpose of that? Because okay, now I'm giving myself 150 more shots to bink 750. I'm spending more than 750 because I'm also
Mhm.
playing the 550, the $5.50, and like the worst thing that happened is like okay, the lineup that would have binked the 555 is in the fucking nickel contest,
Yeah. That
and
wouldn't
then
feel
if I win the nickel contest, I still lose for the day. Like it
exactly.
like to me, that's where the line gets drawn. I don't mind, you know, making unique lineups up until that point of like when the 20 max in baseball is $3,000 the first. So it's
Yeah.
like, but I'm only putting in like $800 worth of GPP entries. So it's like, yeah, there may be a day. Most of the time, I've gotten lucky where the contests that I've won the most. Of course, the day that I won the slant in NFL last year, I would have won 150,000 in the Millie Maker, but
Yeah.
I wasn't playing the Millie Maker. So it's like I don't get upset about that because it's
No.
like that's not one of those things where I had entries and it just so happened that lineup was in one contest versus the other. I literally wasn't playing the Millie Maker, So I can't get upset that I could have won 150,000 coming in second. It's like I would have never had that entry to begin with. But there have been times where you come in first in the 20 max, you win $3,000, and first place would have been 50,000 in the other contest. But most of the time, I think I've been lucky-ish. I mean, call it that. That first place in the 20 max really ends up being sixth place in the 150 max, and it's like actually I made $3,000 is actually more money than sixth place. So it's like okay, so I'm fine with that. But do you think that do you not make all uniques because you care less about diversification? That you're more aggressive with your bank? Is it more of a nit thing? Because I'm one of the few people that do. Most multi-entry GPP players are not doing like they're building a 150 set and that's their 150 lineups or whatever amount. And I'm putting 80 in, but I'm also putting 20 in here. So like I may be building 150 lineups, but like not all in one contest. And I'm doing it more to even out my swings. Because people look at, I mean, I've had people look at my roto tracker since I do show it. You know, I posted on Twitter before, and I am primarily a GPP player, even though I play cash games to even out the swings. And they look and they go, "Where the hell are your swings?"
Yeah.
And because like my swings aren't that dramatic at all. Yet I call them dramatic, and a 10% downswing, you know, it's like 30 grand or something for me.
Yeah.
But I only play like 1% of my bankroll, and I diversify to that extent. That do you believe that there's no correct way? Like I'm not asking. Well, you're doing it this way, and I'm doing it this way. Which one is right? Because I don't think there isn't a right. It's just a matter of risk of a loss aversion, risk aversion. You know, I read you have an article from 6 years ago. I found on Roto Grinders. Don't learn bankroll management the hard way.
Yeah, that was right at the beginning.
Right at the beginning, right? And basically talking about this was like 2015, talking about your 2014 season that you were doing well, but you were like playing 10%, 20% of your bankroll, whatever, and then you went busto. Then you deposited again, and then you were a little bit more responsible, and then you ended up binking like 25, 30,000, and then it's like off to the races. So like even looking at that article, like with the amount of volume that you play now, like from 7 years ago, like people don't understand. Like same thing for me. I put in $400.
Yeah,
I'm playing like I didn't have to put in anything more. So people think that you have to only the people that make all this money in DFS. It's because they just have a lot of money. It's like, well, the reason we have a lot of money is because we made it playing DFS for that long. I mean, like from back then. So do you think the differences between like me and you are you more now? Obviously, I'm not on the end of the spectrum where you were when you started. Like I look at what you were doing when you started based on this article, going, you're fucking nuts.
Yeah.
Right. But
no, looking back, I was because now I play way less percent.
Right, but do you play way less percentage? But do you think that I'm still too nitty?
No. Well, you're doing it mostly for baseball too, which is like a completely different thing. Like in
baseball, I do it for all the sports though. When I play basketball, I do the same thing as well.
So for NBA, my philosophy on it is that I don't really I guess I do worry, like I get tilted easily, but I don't worry if I win or lose one slate. I'm trying to play aggressive so that a couple times a month, I'm going to have a bunch of teams that have a chance at coming first in everything. So like my core is always unique, like I said. And because of that, some nights I'm going to be, if you look at my stuff, you're going to be like, wow, that guy is an absolute moron. Like he cashed like 10 out of 150. All his picks were terrible. And then other nights, people are going to say, wow, this guy's a genius. He cashed almost all of his teams. And how did he know this guy? How did he know that guy? And the way I see it is I just want, when my core hits, I don't want to be spread out. Like I'm basically treating it as a long game that I trust my projections in the long run. So yeah, if I was putting my whole bank, or if I was playing like 20% of my bankroll, which I'm not advising anyone to ever even consider doing, if I was playing a ton of money on a slate, like way too much, I would definitely diversify more and make like 500 unique. But because of the percentage I'm playing, I just view it as like, I almost view it as like a cash game. Like I'm trying to cash as many lineups as possible in the tournament. And if I can get a bunch that finish high, great. And if I can profit, great. And if I lose, I'll bounce back tomorrow. So I kind of think of it, let's say you're a hitter in baseball. You know, they always say like, oh, don't swing for the fences, you try and put it in play. And then that's when you'll start getting the results. So I'm not trying to diversify too much and chase the home runs. I'm basically just trying to put like my 150 favorite lineups based on all the work I put in. And if it works out, it works out. And if it doesn't, then I'll get them tomorrow. That's
Yeah, but what percentage of your bankroll are you playing in GPPs?
In tournaments, I'd say probably 1%.
Okay. Oh, so then you're more towards my end of the spectrum. So that is right. So the less you, because the same reasoning of me playing less lineups, but I play the less lineups. It sounds counterintuitive, but the less lineups that you play, the more risky they should be. Right?
Yeah.
Because that's what you're pretty much doing. Like you're doing the less percentage of your bankroll that you're playing means that you could afford bigger swings.
Exactly.
Which means that you're going to play a much higher variance strategy of, because we see that in baseball also with guys like Ricky D and Wakey Wakey, Giant Squid. Like they'll take like two pitchers and a stack and like they're in almost all their lineups and then rotate a whole bunch of people around them. So if they get that right, like they could clean up the entire site, but when they're wrong, they're losing 90+% of their buy-ins. Now, if you're only playing 1% of your bankroll, you could survive those swings. If you're playing 3%, 4%, 5%, like you're gonna lose a lot. I mean, you may not be able to survive that. And the same thing with less lineups. That the more lineups you play, to me, the more you should prioritize diversification. And the less lineups, I don't mind if I'm playing 20 lineups and I'm like, I'm just going to X out some teams. I'm going to X out, Garrett Cole's going to be 70% on in the slate. I just X him out.
Yeah.
You're like I'm going to play for the case that this slate goes that Garrett Cole gets only 12 points, and I'm going to build 20 lineups that benefit from that. If I'm playing 150 lineups, it's more likely that I don't X him out. I may not have him in many lineups. Right? Only because now my risk starts going up and up and up, that I want to have outs as many ways as possible because I'm spending 150 times the amount of money, right? Instead of 20 versus 150 is 7.5 times. And with these payout structures the way they are, like dude, I mean, you end up this season in MLB, I've had 8 top 10s and I'm losing in GPP.
Yeah.
Right, so you have to come in the top.
Yeah.
Get anywhere close. So, I need to protect myself. I need to protect my downside more.
Yeah.
Do you view this now coming from that article about bankroll management? Because the figures that you're listening in this bankroll management article, in comparison of what you have today in your bankroll, must look like a pittance. I mean, you're like January 2014, $15,942 of buy-ins. It's like that could be that could be a day for you right now. I don't know where I was going with this, but as far as now I'm just getting floored by the amount of money that you put in a month is
it's
right. But the way that you were talking about it in this article of it was devastating for you to lose $1,600 or something. And
no, I was probably 20 or 21. So that's that's a lot of money at that age, I think, just mentally anyway.
But now you're putting this, and this is per slate.
Yeah, I guess it's just all relative to bankroll. So if I have $100 on a site and I'm spending 15 and I lose all $15, I'm going to actually be as pissed as I would be if I lost 1% of what I'm putting in now. And the reason is because you pretty much just want to survive. That's the whole point of DFS. You want to survive to fire as many bullets as possible. And if your bankroll starts to become threatened, it doesn't matter what number it is, it's that you suddenly have to scale back and you lose your opportunity each night. So now if I lose 4 or 5 nights in a row, I can still play the same thing every night. So I still have equal opportunity every day to make it all back. So obviously I hate losing. I don't think anyone enjoys losing, but it's less emotional than it used to be, because at that time I was trying to get to where I am now, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but
So look,
it seems like you found that correctly that uh, the amount of like it's probably a youth thing more
yo,
so than anything of uh, you could it's not about whether or not you will get there, it's
mhm,
how long it takes you to get there, and many people end up being too impatient.
right, and then I've talked to people in the past, and it's like it's kind of sad thinking back. Like they're very smart people in terms of like sports knowledge, and then they'd say, "Oh, I won. I turned $20 into 500." And then they lose one slate, and they're like, oh, "I'm so pissed. I hate this. I'm just gonna get tilted and spend $100 tonight." Well, why would you do that? You know what I mean? And
Right.
it's sad. It's like there is. I do believe this is like more of a skill game than betting, but there is the betting element in that some people can't control their emotions and play within their means each night, and it ends up becoming costly for them because they just can't control their emotions like when they lose. And I think it's okay to be upset if you lose, but if it starts impacting how much money you spend on the next slates, that's when it gets dangerous. But yeah, there's just a lot of stories like that. But now, like once you've kind of reached that goal of where you are, it's hard to really get tilted unless you're just being reckless at this point, if that makes sense.
Right, but there's also a lot of people that have started out that are starting now or within the past year with small bankrolls, right?
Hmm.
That look at it going like how do I get to your level? And the point that I you can't it's just like in any industry. Like you're an overnight, like it's overnight success, but it took 10, like you don't see, like
Right.
you know most people don't see the 3 albums the band put out as an independent right
Yeah.
before their major album type of hit. So like people find it hard to believe that you could take $500 and
Hmm.
5 years later being playing $5,000 to $10,000 a slate,
Yeah. Exactly.
right? And they they're looking, where's the shortcut? How do I get to that type of thing until the more you look for the easy button, the more you're delaying that
Exactly.
inevitably happening. Because if you're skillful at this and you're plus EV, the
Hmm.
large sample size will take care of it on its own. So when
Right.
like I look at my roto tracker and I see from the beginning going from a couple of hundred to then a couple of thousand and a couple, like you look through that the line and you see what I'm playing now, and it's like, well, it took me 4 years to get there. And there are a
Right.
lot of people that are like, well, I just started playing 6 months ago. How do I get there? It's like,
Yeah.
well,
It's not. There's no.
I'm not, and they could be, and anything that any advice I give them, I look at how they play and they're playing well. I
Yeah.
look and I go, I don't think you're doing anything wrong. I think you're skillful. And like, well, how do I get to your level? I said, you'll get there in 4 years.
Yeah.
Like it's not like I'm not doing anything differently than you're doing. It's just that I'm 4 years ahead of you. And that's it's not a zero sum game long run. Like maybe on the specific day it is. Yeah, fuck you. I want to win. I don't want you to win today. I want to come in first place. But over
Exactly.
the
Yeah.
long run, over a 5 year period, if I could turn 500 into 500,000 over 5 years, well, you could do
Hmm.
the same thing. It's just that
Yeah.
play the way you're doing and give it five. People try to go. It's like, well, I'm at 50,000 now. Do I play the Thunderdome? It's like, no, play what you're playing.
Yeah.
Like, why
Exactly.
do you have to get there now? Like, like,
Exactly.
what's the rush?
Yeah, and that's pretty much what I was explaining. It's like there's people like they need the instant. They feel like they need the bankroll, and they don't want to wait. They don't want to do the work for it. And I get it. It's like it is frustrating to go through the ups and downs, and you start thinking, man, I'm just never going to get there, because like even if you are good, you do need a there is an element of luck that you need to win a few large bankroll changing nights, in my opinion. Maybe not large, but you need to get lucky, and to win a tournament it requires luck. And you could be like a really good golfer who always comes second in a major, and you just never get that big hit. But I do think that if you have a good process, I think a big issue some people have is overrating their process and thinking that they're better than they are.
Right?
Uh,
I look in your article. It said that that's what you thought, right?
Yeah, it's like no matter how good you think your lineup is, like it's like projecting a player to hit 5 home runs if you think he's in a good spot. If you think that your lineup is going to come first out of 20,000 people, like it can, and it both could happen, but like you can't expect it to happen to the point where you're overspending for that. But I think people just need to be patient. That's honestly my top advice. Be patient. Understand that like even though you see like our names doing well most of the time, there's going to be times like even right now, like I'm on a bit of a downswing. There's going to be times when people are on a downswing and they're not going to be posting screenshots to Twitter. Look how much money I lost tonight. You know what I mean? Like no one does that. You hear from them 3 months later in between screenshots and you're like, wow, I wish I could be that guy. You know what I mean? But like, yeah, I don't post a screenshot like each time I do well, but like I can kind of understand playing at this level now for the first time this year that there's no way that any player at the top just wins month after month after month. Like they'll win year by year, but like they're going to have losing months and losing stretches. And really the key is how you handle that. And if you crumble under that and you're like, I hate this, I give up, I'm pulling all my money, and then realistically, it's hard to have sympathy for people like that because they just expect themselves to win every single night. And it's just not realistic.
Well, do you think that some of that unrealistic, perception is based on, kind of how the content industry is?
Yeah.
When it comes to I mean, the best it doesn't affect me, but the weirdest thing is like the second episode of this podcast. The title was "There's no better marketing than winning," because the second episode was the week after I won the slant this past NFL season, and let me tell you, the screenshot of that of like, yeah, I won, and people seeing that I won, and not because people follow me on Twitter or whatever.
Yeah.
I got a ton of new subscribers and people buying the theory of daily fantasy sports, or whatever like that. And it's like, I'm not doing anything different than I did the week before. I mean, like I get one of these binks like once a year or so. I mean, that's how I play. That's what, yeah, okay. But what? This doesn't mean anything. I mean, it doesn't change anything that I say or do or anything like that. So I see the fruits of like how stupid most people are or gullible. And I try to, you know me, I try to do on this podcast and on Roto Grinders that I'm just fully this is the real DFS, right?
Yeah.
And most of the time I don't have any picks. There's no picks. There's no plays. I don't have any plays. There's probabilities. Look at the numbers, play the build good lineups, and good luck. I mean, like that, but that's not market. It's hard to market that way. I try to market that way, and some people are like, no, I want to learn the why, and I want to learn how, and I want to learn all of this that has nothing to do with sports. But you have to admit that 95% of people are like, this guy knows what's the play tomorrow, and I still, even now, after doing the content that I've been doing for the past 2, 3, 4 years, I still get DMs of what favorite plays in tonight's games. Yeah, and I'm like, how are you following me and still asking these questions?
Yeah, it's like you have to figure it out on your own to be successful. Like you have to have your own process, and then go ask people who they like and compare. It can't just be like relying on someone to give you.
But really, there's no one to like. I don't even understand what the question is.
Yeah, no, it's just I agree.
Right, but you understand what I'm saying? Like, there's a difference. Like, do you like this guy? Well, I have a projection for the guy, but I mean, like, he'll fit in some lineups. He'll fit in some other. I mean, what's there to like? The only time I could say I don't like the guy is like, if I think the better thing to do, I think the vernacular in the industry for content wise, because you've been at Roto Grinders, you've written stuff, you've done NHL stuff. I mean, you were doing stuff for Roto Grinders before I was even playing DFS.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but do you think that content wise or perception content, whatever, in the industry is still too much in 2012? It's still too much of the I could understand in 2012 DFS of where we don't have on-off tools, we don't have projection models, we don't have, you're going, if anything, you're going MLB, you're going to Fangraphs or Baseball Savant. You're kind of looking up stats. He has a good strikeout rate, but there's no like analytical really methodology behind it that then you could say, okay, based on all the stats that I looked at, I like this guy for his price and that. So essentially, what you're saying is, I believe that he's projected better point per dollar for his salary. Now that we have projection models, like it's there, or I mean, like the numbers there. Like there's nothing for me to like. Here are the projections, and based on the projections, JD Martinez, it shouldn't be 4,700. He should be like 5,200, and he's probably a good value on today's baseball slate. But understand, baseball is high variance, and he could go 0 for 4. So who the fuck knows? Or just like with NBA, with the Giannis is out and Middleton is 6,200, and it's like, well, obviously he's going to project well for 6,200. But like if Middleton was like 10-2, you'd be like, okay, no big deal. You don't have to play him.
Right.
Like, but those types of things, like in 2012, you'd have to know like instinctually that when this guy's out, this thing happens, that type of stuff. But do you think in 2021, still too much of the content is based around, like, is still based around that core thing, the core fundamental miscalculation, the misperception of DFS of who do you think is going to do well tonight? In as far as this one slate, instead of thinking, how do I play DFS over the course of 365 days that makes me profitable? And I don't have to be right I'm not looking to be right every day. I'm just looking to be right more often than the field in the right contests and make 12% ROI. Like the content industry is still, who do you like, and who do I play, and who do you think is going to do well? Do you think that's part of the reasoning why people have unrealistic kind of expectations? They think that like they should be able to be an oracle. Like, who do I play and how do I win? And that's how I'm going to follow this guy because he won. So he's going to tell me who to play next week. And I'm like, I have nothing to fucking tell you. Like, I just play good lineups. Well, do I play this team or that team? Both of them look pretty good. And they go, well, which one should I play? It's like, what contest are you in? I'm in the large field. It's like, okay, this one's better for large field and that one isn't. And they think so you think this team's going to do better. It's like, no, that team is less owned and you're playing like they don't understand, like, I'm not picking people based on who I like. There's no nothing.
Yeah.
But don't you think that that's the most market? Like it's easy to market the easy button with plays and picks and stuff like that. But the people that really need the help are the ones that need the opposite of that. And it's like they don't, but they're not attracted to that. They're attracted to, oh, this guy has a screenshot and he has the plays of the week and the picks of the litter and all that bullshit.
Well, people just want the instant gratification. Like they just want to see this guy won. I'm going to copy whatever he says, and then it just ends up leading to a bad process. But I do kind of.
But it doesn't work.
I agree. I mean, it's not. It wouldn't be hard to be a scammer in this industry. Like I could take a screenshot from a night I lost like a lot of money and had one tournament team finish high up and be like, hey, you want to finish in the top 5% like me? Like come follow my picks, just send me a PayPal or whatever. Like it's not hard to trick someone. It's kind of unfortunate that most people don't want to do the actual work and figure out how they can improve. And I do agree. Like I'll get questions from people sometimes. They'll be like, hey, yeah, do you like Jimmy Butler today? And I'm thinking like, yes, but like, what's the rest of your team? Like at what cost are you using him? Like there's no individual plays that I like to the point that I just use some guy who's going to get 0. You know what I mean? Like I like Giannis. I think Giannis will have a good game every single day he plays. I think Jokic will have a good game every single day he plays. Like it's not a matter of if I like them. It's like, are they worth it? How owned are they? Like there's just so many other factors.
All the stuff that how do you play DFS? Right.
Not a yes or no question. It's like, it's a very complex question. And most people think it's just like a yes or no thing. And it's not at all.
Yeah, but don't you think the problem is that a lot of the content is, we know that it's a complex question, but we're going to give you the yes or no, even though that's not the right answer.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is an issue for people who want to win long term, but I guess like these sites, they got to make their money too, and it's people's screenshots sell, money sells. Like people just want success. Like they'll see. Let's say someone who lost a lot of weight and they'll be like, what do I eat today? Can you imagine that?
Right.
You think I should eat this banana? What do you think?
Right. Like, and then you expect to wake up the next day being 40 pounds lighter. But I ate the banana. How come I don't look like you?
Yeah, I look the same. I've been eating healthy all week. What's going on? How
Right,
did
all
you?
week, right? Or I've been
Yeah,
working out. I want to get big muscles. What
yeah, exactly.
exercise equipment should I buy? Okay, what weight should I lift? And then a week later, it's like, how come I don't look like you? It's like,
Yeah,
well, no, you have to do what you're doing for like 4 years,
yeah,
right?
exactly. Unless your body is just like some sort of insanely good genetics or something, but like that just does not happen. Like you can maybe get toned in a few weeks or start seeing small results, but then like same with DFS, you can have like small results and then be like, oh, look at all this work I did. I'm going to join this $100 tournament or something, and then with losing weight, it's like, yeah, I earned this burger and this ice cream, and next thing you know, you're back in the bad habits that got you there in the first place. So I think people need to just be vigilant about it and not. I think there's a lot of people who sell content who I think they're selling it because they don't necessarily do that well in general. Not everyone, but I think it's very easy for someone to take a screenshot and get people to pay them. And so why not, right?
Right.
But I think people get too reliant on just other people and all walks of life instead of there's no shortcuts to success in this. Like there's a reason that most people lose at it, even though I'd assume, let's say the 90% of people who lose money in DFS or whatever it is, I'd probably guess like 70% of them are trying hard to win and they just don't know how to, and they're just copying other people's stuff and then blaming other people when they lose, if that makes sense.
Right, because it can't be your fault because you have
Yeah,
to, you know everything, right? Exactly.
exactly.
Well, that's what I try to do here. I mean, with my stuff, like I don't consider just like I don't consider myself a tout.
Yeah,
Yes, sure, I work for Roto Grinders. Sure, I have a course for sale, but for me, it's scaling my knowledge, and if you're willing to pay me, I mean, I'm a businessman, right?
yeah. I
Right.
actually,
But to me, I'm doing it ethical. I'm not saying that I have plays or picks or nothing like that. I'm just like people ask me questions, and
yeah,
I answer the same questions over and over and over again. So it's like, why don't I just put something together that has all the answers to all the questions that people normally give me? And here you go. And you could buy it for a cost. So now there you go. I can make a little bit of money or do the pregame show on Roto Grinders. It's like, okay. But the whole point of the pregame show on Roto Grinders is, and a lot of people don't believe me. It's what I do at 11 o'clock in the morning. I mean, it's like I'm just showing you what I've been doing for 5+ years at 11 o'clock in the morning. Waking up, getting well, now it's apple juice. It used to be coffee. Going through Results DB. Before it was just going through before Results DB existed, I would download CSVs for the contests and start
yeah,
looking at sharp players' lineups. Oh, what is this guy doing? What is that guy doing? Where did they go? Okay, I didn't think about these types of construction. Just seeing how I differed from them, how I did from I'm doing that, and then looking at today's slate, going like, okay, what's the macro stuff that I need to know, right?
yeah,
Is there
for
any
sure.
weather issues here? Is Kawhi potentially sitting? You know, like you're looking at that, you're looking at the initial projections, going, okay, let me build some teams just to see what the chalk is and go, okay, more people are going to play here. They're going to do this. They're going to do that, and then like I don't have to do anything for 5 hours, right? I mean, like now I'm just waiting for news to come in. But like that's what I do in the like I'm not showing thing I'm not doing anything different. So to me, I don't feel like I'm touting anything. I'm just a DFS player that if you want knowledge and I like talking and here you go, I'll answer questions. And do you believe the same thing as me, Warren, that uh I could give out all of my information and say what I say and do all of this, and it still doesn't matter because 95% of people won't fucking do it anyway.
I agree. I think people want shortcuts, and when they see this, I think people get motivated more in life when they actually start seeing success. But to see success, you need to work hard. So it's like a catch 22. It's like, what's going to come first? Am I going to copy someone's picks and hit first and then get motivated and saying, wow, I can make real money at this? Or am I going to struggle at the beginning and say, I want to do well at this. I'm going to figure this out. And most people aren't willing to go through that, especially with the stigma that, you know, betting money on sports has. Like if you tell people that you do this, I'm sure a lot of people go, oh, isn't that risky? That's like the first thing people always say. Um, but yeah, just going back to a point before when you get the questions, I actually had someone once ask me before a Super Bowl, they said, how many points do you think will be scored in tonight's Super Bowl game? Like, because like I don't know, they think people who win, they have like this innate like gift or something. Like, I don't know how many points are going to be in the Super Bowl,
Well, probably
but
the
like,
line, if it's the day of, the line is probably pretty efficient on the over under.
yeah, no, for sure. But like, people were like, "Do you think 54 is a good guess or something?" I'm like, "Yeah, the Vegas line is 51, so that's not bad if you think they'll score more."
Right.
Funny, like I'm sure you get way more of those questions than I do because like you're,
Not necessarily those questions.
yeah,
I just think when you say working hard, I think you have to, to me, I think you have to enjoy puzzle solving. Like
yes,
a
I
lot
agree.
of the stuff that I do is puzzle solving.
Yeah,
It is like, for instance, I mean, I've done it in the past with new like I'll experiment with strategies. Like
hmm
not necessarily in real play. I mean, you could simulate stuff. There are ways to test things out. Uh,
yeah,
but I'm going through results DB looking at like players that are doing well, and if they're doing things that I don't understand, I
hmm
don't automatically assume that this guy's a donkey and he's getting lucky.
right.
Like
No,
I don't start from like in the back of my head I am truthfully. In the back of my head I'm like, how is this guy winning? This guy's a fucking idiot. Like look at these lineups. This doesn't make any sense. So going through players and seeing like new strategies, like whether or not this guy is a donkey getting lucky or finding something new or are sharper players doing things differently now than they were in the past because I go under the notion that like for instance stacking like when I started playing baseball DFS baseball in MLB in 2016 most sharp players were stacking
Yeah,
but but a lot of the content was mostly about like I like this play and that play. Since I came from a game theory background, I wanted to experiment with the notion of like using leverage positionally. So like this second base, because basically in baseball, there's so many more positions that get locked. So like the one that you tilt the most is always catcher, right? Because there's
yeah,
not many good catchers. So if one cheap fucking catcher from some random team gets like 2 home runs and they're like
yeah,
more than 2% owned, it's like you're gonna need them in large field GPPs. And because there's no other catchers, like you have to roster a catcher on DraftKings. Or like
yeah,
if you have a first baseman that hits a home run and another first baseman hits a home run, like no one could have both of them in the lineup. So like I'm not as long as I have a home run in the first base spot, I don't have to worry about it. So like I was trying to use that as a way to build lineups until I found out that no, correlation means way more than that. But I wanted to see. But my first instinct is always if the people that seem to be winning, using the word winning, seem to be, are doing one
hmm
thing, it's more likely to be correct because they have the financial incentive to do so.
correct. Yeah,
Right? And if there are people that are not doing that, are doing
hmm
something different, there either has to be either they have not found that strategy, that they don't realize that they're being minus EV, or they have found a better strategy that has not yet been, shown to be financially prudent. And a
right.
lot of times you don't get to see that like until everyone knows it already, right?
Mm.
It's one of those things that if you probably go back to 2012 MLB DFS, there was much less stacking than there is now in 2021. So like over the course of time, like NHL line stacking or the game stacks in NFL, right? The run backs like the super stacks and then you run back from the other team like but you could find all this information out by studying sharp players lineups because they're putting in the most amount of money. But the problem comes in is when determining on who is sharp and who isn't. And sometimes that isn't due to like, well, just because someone won the Millie Maker doesn't make them a sharp player.
Correct.
Like
I agree.
someone you could get lucky and win that. We've seen Millie Maker lineups that are like, I don't know how the fuck this lineup got made, but
Yeah,
I want to have that guy's luck. Uh,
exactly. And then they're set for life. They can just sell that screenshot, like
right,
we were saying.
of course, and that a lot of times that's what happens. But
Yeah, the plan.
how do you determine? Because you probably have seen people do weird things in their lineups, and naturally, based on what we would know about DFS, go, that doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
And you may see someone be successful with that. And you go, I don't know, do not know how this person is doing well enough with it. Maybe it's just not a larger sample size. And maybe even 6 months could be like, just okay, it's a lucky run of 6 months that he's winning a lot. How do you determine, like, getting outside of, because some people have asked me even on the pregame shows, like, oh, is everyone's 5-man stacking, so should I now be doing 3-3-2s? And I go, everyone isn't 5-man stacking. Said,
Mm-hmm.
right, it's go into the CSV. It's like, oh, everyone good is doing that, but still a
Yeah.
majority of the contests in these large field GPPs are
Mm-hmm.
still people are not stacking enough. And until it gets to that point, I'm not going to bother looking for any type of alternate strategy, because the strategy's already, it's not being owned enough. But in
Right.
other sports, in niche sports or something like in soccer,
Mm-hmm.
like my evolution of my soccer play from 2015 to now, like, is much different. I mean, the scoring system has changed a bit or whatever, so there have been little nuances. But if you look at my lineups now versus my lineups from 3 years ago, my play
Yeah.
has gotten better, and it's primarily because I'm looking at sharper players that are playing in a way that doesn't make sense to me until I
Right.
learn why it does make sense.
Right.
So
Sometimes.
how do you evolve? Like, 'cause I
Yeah.
know that you're a different player than you were in 2014. So over
Oh.
that time, how do you evolve from seeing counterintuitive strategies from people that seem to be doing well beyond, and how do you analyze on whether or not it always comes down to, this, like we were talking before, Warren, about people blaming other people. My
Yeah.
first instinct is I lose because of my play.
Right.
So I always looked at that. I don't want to assume that, oh no, I'm doing the right strategy and getting unlucky. My first instinct is maybe these people are doing something that I don't understand that is better.
Right.
Let me see. A lot of times you look into it and it turns out they are fucking donkeys,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it turns there's nothing I could see that makes what they're doing to be
Right.
better than what I'm doing. So I don't know why they're doing it anyway, but I'm not changing anything. But
Right.
how have you seen that in multiple sports over your 7 years of play? Because you have to evolve. I mean, the play in 2014 versus the play now in 2021 has to
Mm-hmm.
be drastically different.
Yeah. I mean, I'd say it can be very. It can pop a bubble, be pretty humbling if you realize that other people are doing things you're not, and you ever get that moment, like that epiphany. It's like, wow, maybe they're right about this, and I'm the one who's wrong the whole time. And I think that's kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about people overestimating their own intelligence and being like refusing to acknowledge that the lineups that won in any way could have been smart because they didn't have that player. You know what I mean? Like, it's just not. It's not a healthy way to think, because you're going to end up dying. You're either going to die alone on your hill, or you're going to come out ahead. And usually, if it's every night the person who wins a moron, it's just you can learn something from the person at the top, and you can even say, hey, like, they got lucky. The game went to 3 overtimes, and they picked the backup shooting guard, or an MLB, the 9 hitting catcher hit 2 home runs. Like, is that skill or is it luck? I mean, I highly doubt that they knew that was going to happen. That's actually a big reason why I don't play baseball anymore. It's just too much. There's just too much of that each slate, I found. But regardless of that point, I think it's good. I always like to try and go back and not just look at who's winning. I like to look at the guys who are posting like the most contests, like the highest volume guys, similar to what you said. And I like to see what they do in like 3-man contests versus head-to-heads, triple ups, see if they changed their lineups at all, see who they picked. And I've probably in the long run lost money in head-to-heads in NBA to all the good players, just because my strategy is a bit different, and I don't know, it's more prone to struggling in cash some nights, but I'm always working on it. But like, I'll look at their teams most nights and say, you know what, that's a good team. But once in a while, I'll realize, hey, this guy wouldn't have done well if that other player didn't get in foul trouble or whatnot. So it's good to keep a healthy balance and not always blame yourself if you lose. Sometimes you will get unlucky, and sometimes you'll make mistakes. And I think it just takes experience to figure out if you've screwed up, or if sometimes like I'll win and I'll be like, I got lucky there. Like this one night.
But good players think that way. But that's the difference between, to me, I find that that's the difference between good players and bad players. Good players like look at how lucky it was for them to come in first versus 20th rather than the other way around. Bad players are like, yeah, yep, perfect lineup. And it's like, I look at like, no, this guy, you know, if it wasn't for the last play of the game, getting a 7-yard pass that gets him over the 100-yard bonus, like that was a bullshit play that they could have ran out the clock there and they didn't, you know, it's like, and that was the difference between first and fourth place. It's like, I'm more likely to look at those types of things. Our job as GPP players is to try to get lineups into like the top 1%. Like let's have the best chance of getting towards the top. And once it gets towards the top, it's kind of like you let it go like a pigeon. And it's just like, you know, like a bird flying. It's like wherever it lands, I don't know what the fuck that's going to land, but as long as I get it up over there, it'll hopefully over time it'll land first more often than not.
Yeah, I think one thing I like to look at for NBA. I know it's baseball season, but I like to look at people who game log chase and the ones who are kind of like buying low on like the good players who keep getting in foul trouble or they're shooting 20% threes in their last four. Because I do think that the algorithms start to create a little bit of a bias against those players, even if it's a little bit unfair, not something that's necessarily going to happen a fifth game in a row. But I always look at other people's teams. I think it's good to keep like a good balance of confidence and being willing to learn something new. Like I'd say throughout the NBA year this year, even like I look at someone's team and I'd say, you know what, I can learn from that. Like in this situation, his pick didn't even do that well, but I saw he took 20 shots and I underrated what his role was going to be. So I'm always like trying to learn, and I think it's important to not get too confident in your own abilities. So that way you're never complacent and overly satisfied. Like until you make it to being one of the best, I think you should always be willing to learn from other people and see if you can, even if you get like marginally better, or you learn like one thing a night. I think that's important.
Right. I mean, my whole theory of play is to exploit the overconfidence of other people.
Yeah.
I mean, I start the slate with I don't know anything. All I know is that all these other people think they know. Like like that's my style of. That's why I use other people's. I don't build my own model. It's like I can't make a model better than these. So why don't I just use the models that I see around the industry? I could obviously write them off as expenses, so I could see them around and whatever. But it's like I'm not looking at anything else other than anyone else is looking. But I know that other people are looking at these. Right? It's like it's one of those. It's that third level thinking of, well, you're using these projections. So let's say, like in baseball, I'm using the bat projections.
Yeah.
Right, for Derek Carty's projections. But I have subscriptions everywhere, so I could see projections everywhere. And in the bat, this guy, you know, this pitcher is rated higher than in most other models. It's like, but I also know that people could see that, right? Yeah. So it's like this guy, like I know what people are going to see everywhere, and then I go, well, based on all of this, this team is going to be under-owned because they don't project poorly, but they don't project well in any model. But they're a high ceiling team and they have a 4+ run total, and they're going to be 3% owned. And it's like, because I know everyone is looking at that, everyone is looking at everything, I play that team and then I win. And then people ask me, well, what put you on that team?
Yeah.
Right? And of course I'm playing multiple lineups, so it's not like I'm playing all or whatever. And my answer is simply because no one else was playing them. And they were high. They were 3% owned, but they had a 5.5% chance of being the winning team. And that's why I played them. He said, and then they asked, where would you have seen that?
Yeah.
And I'm like, because they would be like, I looked at the bat, they didn't project well in the bat. And I said, I know. And they go, well, they didn't project well in Awesome. I go, I know. Said, did they project badly though? Said no, but they didn't project well. They were like towards the bottom, 2/3, down there, whatever. And I said, and that's why I played them. And they go, because I know you're looking. I know, because is there anything to show that this team is going to put up 12 runs today? No, there's nothing that will show you that. And everything that everyone else is looking at is not going to find that either, which all it does is decrease the ownership of the team. And to me, like, you hate baseball for it. I love baseball for GPPs because it's so high variance on one given day that who's to say who's going to be the highest scoring team? So all I need to know is, what does everyone else think? And I'll just play the other things. I mean, like, that's sometimes all that it comes down to. Now, I may use the projections to physically make the lineups, right? Because I had the medians, and I could, higher projected, lower owned, and get the one-offs in and everything like that. But at the end of the day, I'm picking, most of the time, I'm stacking teams based on well, no one else is, like, and they're not hard. It's not like I'm stacking a team against Garrett Cole or Jacob deGrom. It's just like a team that's just off the radar, like, because there's 5 obviously good spots, and I'm taking the 8th best spot.
Right.
And it somehow happens that they put up 12, 14 runs. But then people ask, like, what put you on? And it's hard to explain, Warren, the process of, I just looked at what everyone else was doing and tried to do something different than that.
Yeah, because most people, they don't want that quote-unquote risk, even though nothing in baseball is safe.
Right.
They don't want to be on an island themselves because they think there's a reason this team is only 2 or 3%. It's not because they can't do well. It's because they're slightly less likely to, but that doesn't mean they can't do well. And if they do well, like you said, you have a way better chance of finishing in first place if you're a 3% team comes first, as opposed to the 25% owned stack coming first. Like, there's thousands of other people thinking the same thing with that, so it's harder to win with that. So it makes sense. Like, I think game theory in baseball is it's hard to tout, though, like you said.
Right. That's exactly what I mean. But this is opposite. But this is opposite of how, like, what you said earlier. Like, you tend to go with projection. Like, you're naturally going to be contrarian.
Oh,
and
like that's NBA. I think other sports, I'd be far more open to, like, game theory. In NBA, I just trust my stuff so much that I don't feel the need to diversify off of it. But if I do play MLB this summer, I'm going to be doing, like, kind of exactly what you said, in that I'm going to pick the low owned stacks within reason. Like, not going to have, like, the worst stack, but I'm something where I see, like, a little bit of upside, and maybe just throw them all in a lineup and hope they're 1% and just go crazy, because anything can happen in a baseball game. And it kind of has, like, a correlation. Like, if you have a hot start, there's, like, a better chance you get some bad relief pitcher who comes in and then keep hitting him. Maybe the backup catcher comes in and throws it. Doesn't take much for a stack to go off. And at low ownership, anything can happen. So, but I agree, it's hard to tell people who are asking you for advice, like, why did you use them? And there's no real statistical analysis other than game theory to justify it.
Right. I mean, but that's hence the theory of daily fantasy sports. That's why it comes down to. But I talked to so many top players that think more along towards your lines of, like, I have my projections, like we see recently with the whistles go woo, right? That guy. I mean, he was on lulls and basically said that, like, he has a module. Like, we found out that he's not a schmuck. We found out that he's someone that builds predictive. I mean, like, he literally builds optimizers, right?
I met him at the finals. He had his laptop open the whole time. He was always working hard.
Right.
He was a friendly guy, but I could tell he wasn't. From the first interview, I was like, oh wow, this guy won, really, when he did the whistle noises. But then when you actually meet him in person, and maybe not after winning $1 million, I think everyone would be in that kind of mood. But when you meet in person, you're like, okay, this guy actually knows what he's doing.
Right. But even he says that he doesn't factor in ownership often at all in most of the sports that he's played. No, in most of the sports that he plays.
Interesting. I think baseball is different. I think baseball is, like, the one where you should factor it the most. But, like, for me, I personally don't weigh it too much in golf. I don't weigh it too much in hockey or football, because I just think there's so many unique combos you can get that if you love the 20% owned guy or the 20% owned stack, and, like, there's no, like, you think it's great and worth it, then there's other ways to differentiate yourself. And I don't like to give other people the plays I like when I can have them myself. If that makes sense. Like, I don't like to go on an island, but whereas in baseball, I feel like even the best stack, like, I don't feel like anything is a guarantee in that sport. Not that it isn't others, but it's even more variance in baseball than it is others. So I'm okay with playing the odds because you're using 1,000 at bat sample to predict 2 at bats against a pitcher. You don't know how many runners are going to be on base. You don't know. I don't know. There's just so much that goes into play that it's almost all luck to me, to the point that you almost just want like the lower owned squares, if that makes sense.
Right, but it also matters on how you approach DFS. Fundamentally from the start, like
Mm-hmm.
you're to use sports betting terminology, you're a market maker.
Yeah.
Right. So I would say most top DFS players are market makers.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Market makers meaning that they originate their own projections. Right. They're coming from they're trying to predict what's going to happen based on the salaries and what lineups, and they do simulations and they run and they go based on my methodology, based on my predictive analytics, based on everything. I'm going to project this distribution curve for this player and for this team. And this is what I'm projecting and everything like that. So if you trust in your stuff, it's like you wouldn't care what anyone else does. It's like, I'm just over the long run, I'm going to be more accurate than anyone else. But I fundamentally come from the complete other end of the spectrum. I come from I don't even need player projections. I just need to predict the ownership of all the players and then go, I'm going to make the assumption that the field in general. Now there may be sharp players that are good, but there's still tons of dumb people in this field that the ownership is going to be inefficient because people are going to be overconfident on certain things. They're going to be biased towards certain statistics, right? They're going to overplay this. I mean, it's human beings. So to me, the most important thing to me is not the player projections. It's the ownership projections. Because obviously, if you tell me, for instance, in basketball, Warren, if I just told you that there's going to be a player that's on a 10-game slate, that's going to be 85% owned.
Yep.
In a large field GPP. Mm-hmm. Do I have to tell you anything really about that player?
It depends. See, like that's.
But I'm just saying in general. I know there's nuance that, but you would figure that that's probably like a $3,800 point guard. Yeah. That's someone's injured, and he's walking into, like, he normally plays 18 minutes, and now he's going to play 36 minutes with 28% use. Right? It's one of those. If anyone's going to be 85% owned on a large basketball slate, it's probably going to be one of those types of guys. Like 30% owned. It's hard to tell what that could be. But when it's like guys like 85, 90% owned in GPPs, it's like, this is Kyrie's out, Harden's out, and the Nets, they're playing Chios at 38 minutes, and he's 3,200, right? Right, yeah. It's that type, but to me, I don't need a player projection for that. All I need to know is that he's going to be 85% owned, and I know what type of player. Now in baseball, anyone that's 85% owned is over-owned. Like there's no one that could be that maybe if Garrett Cole is 4K, okay, sure, and then I could get you there. But when you approach DFS from that perspective, it almost makes me feel like I look at your style like most people play, going, I don't know why you have to be that accurate. Yeah. Like to me, all I need to know is that that there's enough dumb people in this field that the ownership is going to be inefficient. So should Ronald Acuna be 36% owned on a 10-game slate in baseball? Like, no, he shouldn't. Like, just I don't need to know anything about who he's facing or anything. There's no batter on this slate that should be 36% owned. And if he beats, he's probably in the best spot for a $6,100 batter. I get it. But I don't need to project him out. All I need to know is, I guess I'm not playing him much. And if he beats me, he beats me. And the same thing in basketball. If like we get, Luka's, with the studs, on a normal, this past season, it's almost impossible to give NBA examples because shit happens every slate. But let's say NFL, like in NFL, like if everything's efficient and like it's like we look at like the 7K range running backs, like are you going to play Eckler? Are you going to play? I forget who's even in the James Conner or who. What just the range of running backs where it's just like like they're not Christian McCaffrey, but they're not like cheap or whatever. And you look and you go like, if you looked at the player projections, like you'd find 4 running backs that project for within 1 point of each other.
Hmm.
Yet for some reason, one of them is going to be 26% owned.
Yeah.
And another one's going to be 9. Joe Mixon's going to be 9% owned. And it's like the projection is 1 point difference.
Hmm.
Do I need to know the difference between the two? What's more important to know? The difference of the 1 point in projection for the player, or the difference of 17 percentage points of ownership for that? So, like, to me, the projections are the least, the player projections are the baseline
Hmm.
for how people view the ownership. That's why I want to. That's why I want to know everything. That when people are like, oh, do you read content? It's like I listen to content. I mean, I put my podcast on like it's talk radio, but I listen
Yeah.
to content all like for NFL. I'll listen to everything the whole week. It's
Right.
like, but I'm not listening to who people like. I don't care who they like. I'm
Right.
listening because I know other people listen. It's I know other people will be listening to this show,
Right.
and
Right.
hearing Evan Silva say he likes this guy, and
Hmm.
although RNRG, he's projected to be 16% owned, I think he's going to be 20. And if he's going to be 20, that means other people are going to be less owned. So I'm just thinking in terms of that. So I need to listen to all of this. I
Yeah.
need to look at all the projections because I know that other people are looking for. If you have an Awesemo subscription,
Hmm.
I'll know. I'll know. It's so easy to find.
Yeah.
I could download a CSV, and you give me a username and you give me their exposures, and I can almost I by eye tell you what site they'd subscribe to.
Really. Yeah.
Right? I mean, because I'll look at the difference between like, oh, the bat has this guy higher and that guy lower and this guy. Oh, if you use Awesemo projection, you're going to be playing a lot of Yankees on FanDuel today, right?
Right.
The bat is much lower on them. The Yankees are still a good team. The bat it's still high, but Awesemo has them as the clear top stack, while the bat
Hmm.
has it as like the third or fourth stack. So I know that if I see, and that's when you also see people that don't know how to use optimizers. You download the CSV, you give me a username, and you'll see lineups where you'll see users that are playing 100 lineups, and they have like 70% of one hitter
Hmm.
as a one-off. Like, it's not one of those types of things that they're stacking one team and going like high variance.
Yeah. That's
It's
that's
like a
pretty.
one. It's like obviously this guy fit into most of his lineups, and you see like the 2K shortstop punt is like
Yeah.
54% exposed. So I'm like, okay, I know what projection set they used, and I know
Yeah.
that they didn't set any type of. I know that. So if this guy, they're built, you could tell just by looking at that. So
Yeah.
to me, I find that the most. To me, that's how I play. I want
Hmm.
to see what everyone else is doing, and the difference between 1 point and the projections for players, like for the people that you like you're in your cash lineup. It's like, oh, if you have a 5% owned guy, you're fine
Hmm.
with that because you that's who you think that should be in the lineup. Me, I
Right.
look at it as like, to me, I want to play the highest owned people as possible, right? I mean, like I don't even know what the player projections are. Just give
Right.
me the highest owned lineup and let other people make mistakes, and in the long run, I'll get a percentage return. And who cares if I'm off by a point or two in the projections? I'm playing high owned guys, and in the
Interesting.
GBP, I'm doing the complete opposite.
Okay. Yeah, see, I do the same in cash, but like my cash is head to heads, three mans. The three mans are the key. Like if I will look at the projections and like the chalk ownership, and if there's something that I don't project well that I know everyone else is going to have, I'll like spam join the three mans.
Well,
Like
because
that's
you make more. I mean, but I've talked about this on the podcast
yeah. So do
because you could beat because you're making twice when you win. You're beating two people with a similar lineup.
exactly like you're going to beat one, you're going to beat both or neither most of the time.
Right. Now, in
That's
head
the
to heads, that wouldn't be needed or double ups.
no, it wouldn't be needed, but like if I like my player more and he's lower owned, then I'm going to play him.
Right. Well,
That's
of
just
course. But I'm just saying, as far as ownership is concerned, that
right.
it's a very similar. I mean, I do the same thing. Like if I play the bat optimal, if I play the RG NBA optimal, and I see that there's like it's a 2v2, and I'm playing a guy that I know is only going to be 5% owned in cash.
Yeah.
Like if I know because I'll see that I'll see like it's a half an hour before lock, and it's like, okay, I guess I'm going to be playing. Everyone's playing Max Kepler for 3,600 leading off. He's probably going to be 60% owned in cash, but I'm playing Aaron Hicks or whatever, or someone,
Right.
some other, that the bat projects is slightly better, but not other places don't have them slightly better. So what I'll do 30 minutes beforehand is start joining triple ups and quintuple ups and three man, because like if I get on the right side of that 1v1 or 2v2, I want to get 3x. I want to get 5x.
Exactly.
I don't want to get just double my money because I'm already predicting the ownership. So if there's no need to get leverage in cash for double ups. You want to get leverage when you could make 3x, 5, you could progressively make more. So
Right.
like that makes utter. I think people don't understand that. They think in terms of like even you're saying head-to-heads and double ups are different from three mans and five mans and triple ups because of the payout structure.
Yeah, but it still depends on the sport for me. Like in NBA, like I don't even care what other people are doing. But if I'm playing MLB, I agree. Like I'll look, and if first of all, if it's like a 1-versus-1 and the rest of my team is chalk in NBA, I'm gonna pick the chalk guy because I don't want my night dependent on one guy who's projected like 1 point different, because that's stupid. But like usually I'll end up with like 3 or 4 guys who are just kind of off the board, and it kind of just makes more room for error, right? Like there's three or 4 chalk guys versus my low owned guys, and then like all it takes is one of the chalk guys to do poorly, and then one of mine to do great, and then let's say I'm losing, I can pivot 2 of my late guys to other people, or if I'm winning, I can block it. I can block the chalk later. So like there's a lot that I do for cash games that I don't do for tournaments, but like in terms of pre-slate process, I'm always just treating them as similar entities. But yeah, baseball is a completely different animal, and I agree with you there. Like especially a leadoff guy can go 0 for 4 any time of the week, even if it's a good spot. Like he can fly out, line out, and then he faces a tough reliever, then gets pinch hit for or something. Like anything can happen, and I don't think any baseball player should ever be that highly owned when like the best spots are going to fail 65% of the time when they're at the plate.
Right.
Like,
As opposed to basketball where the best spots typically
right.
succeed 65% of the time.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like it's almost like golf where you need like all 8 of your guys to do what you expect, or else you're in trouble. But no, I do agree. I love that strategy of joining 3-mans though. Like that's something I've recently adopted this year, where if I know I'm going to be a bit different, then I recommend it to people. Like I'll see people with like game stacks and double ups, and I'm like, that's stupid. Like why just do that in 3-mans, do that in single entry tournaments, do it in triple ups, because then like if you're right versus the field, like yes, you can win double ups, but like you can just win more, and you're not going to beat the chalky lineup with a game stack 60% of the time, but maybe you can do it 40% of the time and make good money long term. Because yeah, that's what I love about NBA is like the opportunity to beat all the overlap. All you need is like one differentiator who goes nuts, and then you can really just win every contest you're in. Like not tournaments, but cash games, triple ups, etc.
So what is your take on? We've seen a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, about claims of the 3-man collusion.
Yeah.
Because I mean, especially in the higher stakes. My take in general on collusion in this type, which is the real type of collusion.
Yeah.
In the past, like because people have been saying this for a while. In the 3-mans, the 5-mans, that type of people. So basically, you're battling for the lobby. You're trying to get two people in there and trying to get a sucker for the third one. And then you play a slightly overlapped, it's secondary lineup, and then you split. My feeling has always been in the past that if there was collusion going on, the people that have the financial incentive to crack down on it would be doing so. So like I heard this in 2017, 2018, and I'm like, well, if they're committing, like why are all these other high stakes players allowing this to happen? I mean, like it must not be going on, because I don't see people that are putting in tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars saying that it's true, because they have everything to lose on it. So you're barking up the wrong tree. But in the past like 2 weeks, I've seen high stakes cash players talk about people that based on their analysis are it's at the highest level where like everyone knows everything. So like I could aggregate all the projection sets together and know exactly. I mean, dude, in cash games, there are certain users that I'll know what their cash lineup is before the slate
Me
locks.
too. Yeah.
Right? Like, yeah, but the same thing for me. You'll know what my like you will absolutely know what my cash lineup is for
I'll definitely be able to guess 6 of the 8.
You'll be able to get all of it because I literally tell you what I'm going to play. I mean,
Right.
I, like I said, my process. I play it like an index fund. It's like I'm taking this projection set. I'm playing the median optimal and try to beat me. But that's the main reason why I don't play three mans anymore because like my lineup is absolutely predictable.
Right.
So it's the worst scenario to be in is to be
Yeah.
in a three man or a five man with a completely predictable lineup.
Yeah, because then it's your team, which is like it ends up being like 2 versus 2 versus 2, but you're not going to win more than like 30% of the time.
Right, and
Maybe.
then also two people can take advantage of that
Yeah.
by blocking me. I mean, like if you could predict all 8 of my players, you could block my lineup and get different else in the second lineup, and like you'll come out ahead more than 50% of the time. So
Right.
like
Exactly.
you never want to be put in that situation. But that's the basis of the supposed alleged collusion that's
Well,
happening in the high stakes three mans. Are you witnessing this? Are you playing these games?
yeah, I still play them because I end up being so different that it doesn't really matter. But I do know I have noticed in the past, like guys they'll be in head to heads with like one different guy, and then the other guy in my 3 man will have that team, and then they'll have one different. You know what I mean? Like so.
Right? It's not. I just to explain for people that don't understand. Most of the time, when you play
Mhm.
cash games, you're playing one lineup and you're playing it in everything, right?
Yep.
Right. Most of the time. Now,
Yeah.
some people could have different lineups for three mans and five mans or whatever, but it's gets very suspect where someone that always plays the same lineup, like in head to heads,
Hmm.
plays the opposite lineup as someone else in a three man. Like
Yeah.
they're playing the lineup of someone else that you're playing in head to heads, but that
Yeah.
lineup as the like you
No,
understand what I'm saying?
I do. I think it's very possible. Like personally, I don't mind. Like I'm
Well, you're not affected as much because you're probably different enough that
exactly.
they can't overlap you anyway. So you're joining a three man, and it's
Yeah.
what you know who gives a shit? You're going to be a 3v3, 4v4 regardless.
Yeah. So honestly, I it benefits me, but I can see why it's a huge issue, especially if there's like newer players who are joining these and they're not as good. And for a new player, I think it's basically preventing a lot of players from growing into becoming high stakes, and it's kind of keeping people in the lower lobbies, and it makes it like it's very tough to grow a bankroll if you can't play cash games, right? Like you can win tournaments, or it's hard to rely on that, but you can kind of stay afloat by playing lower stakes cash if you have a small bankroll. But I think that it's just kind of I guess it's like it's pretty unfair for people who don't know it's happening, if that makes sense. Like they don't know that the two people they're playing against are working together, and that I think is not fair. Like maybe during a slate, if they're in like a $10,000 3 man, maybe they'd message each other and say, "Hey, I think this guy has this. Why don't you block him with that, and I'll use this." And then whoever like that to me crosses a line, and especially if the other person knows it's happening, I don't think it's bad
No,
because they
but
can.
no one knows that no one knows that this is happening.
Exactly. That's the issue with it, and unfortunately, it's hard to crack down on it because the sites need those players, and if they start threatening to kick them off for it, then it's just going to hurt the site's overall growth. So, I think they may tend to turn a blind eye. They may know what's happening, and they may tell them like knock it off. But I don't know what's going on behind the scenes there. But I definitely think it should be looked into, and especially if the other players are making these claims that they are. But like for me, I kind of sit in the corner. I'm like, yeah, I kind of don't mind. You guys do what you do, and I'll keep joining them, and I'll beat you 2 out of 5 times and profit.
Right, but this is different than lobby battles. Like just because you see the same two people in a three man doesn't mean they're
Yeah.
colluding. Just mean
Oh.
like that you're battling for the lobbies. Like for instance, in soccer or whatever. Like
Hmm.
soccer, if you go to the three man lobby, you're gonna see Saramek, you're gonna see Redcoat, you're gonna see Pew Pew Pew, pretty much.
That's the name I remembered.
Right. Uh, if you want to play high stakes or anything, those are the three names you're going to see. Uh, do I think they're better than me? If anything, slightly. I mean, like these are people I don't want to. I don't want to. I'm not going to play a 3-man where it's me, Saramek, and Redcoat. I mean, like it makes no sense to do that.
Right.
But the thing is that other people want to join 3-mans that are going to be worse than those players. So, if Saramek gets into the 3-man first and then Redcoat gets into second, you know what it does? It prevents people like me or Pew or Fear My Turtle or any of the other. So basically, all they're doing is just like we're waiting for a third schmuck to come in. Not because they're competing, not because they're colluding, just because they have a bigger edge against just they don't want me to join. That's the ride they're joining first. So the whole thing of like battling for the lobby is like when the slate first comes out, like being the first guy in all those 215, 109s, whatever 3-mans, and then like the second sharp player joins, and then like now that starts preventing the third guy. Like, but that's not collusion. That's just game select. That's contest selection. That's just battling.
Also, like a race. Like the second the stuff pops up, like you want to get in there first, so that way, if you're respected anyway, you want to get in there first.
Right? If you're not respected, two sharp players are just going to join and fuck you.
Right. So like I think because I'm so different in NBA, I don't think I get like the same. Like people won't see my name and say, "Oh, I don't want to play him," because they also probably know over time that I'm going to be different than them. So it's kind of like I think we kind of mutually want the action in the 3-man lobby. So I'll just like post a bunch of 3-mans. I don't even look who joins, to be honest. And then unless it's a slate where I'm just going to play all chalk, which happens sometimes, but for the most part, I'm just like I embrace the action. I'm sure they do too. But when I look at like the $10,000 3-mans and I see Empire Maker, like I know that the other players can join. They can afford to join it. But I remember I was talking to Utica at the live finals, and we were actually talking about the 3-mans, and he was saying like, you know, like sometimes it's not the best investment, but sometimes I just want action on a slate, and like I need to have a certain amount in play for it to be worth it. I'm paraphrasing, like we were both drinking, so maybe we don't. I don't remember exactly what he was saying.
But don't you think that's a leak? Shouldn't your action all depend on what the edge is? And if the edge isn't there, you shouldn't be playing it.
Yeah, he told me like similarly. He's a bit contrarian in NBA cash, so he doesn't mind. I think we had like a similar mindset in that he doesn't mind playing them. Whereas like if I'm playing them and I have a 1 versus 1, if I have a 1 versus 1 in anything, I don't want that action. I would cancel it and agree to a tie every single time. Even if I feel I'm like slightly better, I don't want that 1-on-1. I think it's just stupid, and I would rather just block and play the higher own guy at that point. But I agree. Like in 3-mans, it's bad action if you're getting your information from the same source as them, and it just doesn't really make any sense to do. So I get why they dominate the lobby. I think it's a bit unfair, but it's also hard to moderate because like you don't know if they also want that action in the 3-mans against each other. So it's hard to crack down on, but it would be nice if there was some way to.
Yeah, but dominating the lobby and colluding are two different things.
I know it, and it's hard to identify them, especially if you're working for a site and you're going to make these claims. It's hard to prove one from the other, and obviously it would be fantastic if they got rid of all collusion, but it would be tough to pull off, and I'd love to hear some of the solutions that they have to make that happen. But for me, it kind of helps me, so I selfishly just turn a blind eye. But
right, and then also the opposite. If if two people are playing in a 3-man and they're sharing the same lineup, like that's detrimental to them.
Oh yeah,
right. That's something you shouldn't be complaining about. You should want to get into 3-mans.
That's why I joined them. It's like I'd say once a week during the NBA season, I would join, and I'd be facing. It would be a head-to-head to win 3 times, and like even all I have to win is like beat that lineup once. Problem is like you usually have, like you said, you usually have to beat that one lineup in everything.
Right.
So that's when last night I needed that block to beat that one lineup that was in every contest. So it's never fun to lose like that, but at the same time, like I don't mind that if I really like my team, but it can suck if you have like a sick team, and people are like, "Wow, you finished so high in tournaments tonight." I'm like, "Yeah, I lost 50% of my money with the top 10% lineup." Like, it's just how it goes in the higher stakes, but it all balances out in the long run. So I don't mind it, but yeah, it would be nice if there was. I don't know. Do you think there's a way that they could change the whole format of the salaries to make overlap less likely?
No, you're not gonna. No, you're not gonna change. What they should be doing, like Brian Hooper had the best idea. Just create the Matrix format, like
Yeah,
the 3-man lot. All of those 3-mans and 5-mans and the head-to-heads
yeah,
should just be a bucket, similar to what Yahoo does with quick matches.
yeah,
Kind of, like basically you just put in, I want to play 10 3-mans at $50. You don't
right.
get to choose who you play against. It just you could look at the entrance and see, here are all the people that have put in to want to play 3-mans, and then when lock hits, it just auto matches everyone to whatever it is.
Yeah, I don't mind that actually. I remember they had that on. I forget what site it was. They had that. I think it was like draftday.com. That's also probably before you got into it. They were like in 2014, 2015, they disbanded. But I remember they had that, and I actually liked it. It was good.
Well, then you don't have to worry about picking off Pete. Like, there's no head-to-head blocking because
Yeah,
you can't bum hunt. You can't do any of that. It's just you get matched with whoever you get matched with.
exactly. I actually did like that. I think it would be a good solution if they brought that back. But yeah, I was just kind of thinking, like, in terms of like, what if it's too complicated, I guess, to do, but like, say you locked a guy in at 11 p.m. the night before, and the day after their price changed. But I think
you can't do dynamic pricing. That would be ridiculous.
there was a site that tried that and they failed. So I guess there's a reason that they don't try that. But it would be cool if they came up with some sort of solution, maybe getting rid of positions as much. That could open things up. But I do think that given how each position, there's often like one guy who stands out amongst the rest, it's a lot easier for overlap. And maybe positionless contests would be interesting. Like, you just pick 10 players.
It would still be overlap. Dude, we have projections. It'll still be overlap. Come on.
But I think, like, let's say I guess it's hard to really.
Dude, just knapsack that shit. Bing, give me the top 5 line. I mean, I could pick one of the top 5. I mean, dude, it's the
Yeah, I'm thinking out loud.
right.
I have no.
I don't think that's, but because I don't think that's the future of DF. I don't think I never thought it was the future. I thought cash games, double ups. The casual people don't want to. They want to play. They want to put down $10 to try to win 100,000.
Yeah. Well, they're paying for the screenshot advisors. They want the screenshots too. If they don't want to win $10, they definitely want to.
Right. So, like, to me, like, especially in like MLB DFS, I've seen this year, I go through the head. Normally, I'd go through the head-to-head lobby, like, every hour or two, and go, okay, who do I not recognize, and I'll pick off a 20 there or 50. I don't say it's all the same fucking people.
I know.
It's the same. I mean, I'm just like why am I like, okay, I guess as long as I'm diversified, I'll just spread this shit out, and just like, okay, I know, and I'm looking at people. I'm like, I'm going up against. I know what projections I'm going up against. It's like I know what this is going to be. I know these 5 people use the same line. Okay, I know that, and this is going to be. Well, there's no point in taking head-to-heads against these 3 people because they're using the same projections I am. So, like, exactly. Okay, right, I'm going to get the rake back there, and then you're looking and like, where are the new people? Like, there are no new people. Because obviously, if you're a new person and you don't have projections, you're going to get destroyed in cash games.
Yeah, that's why week 1 NFL, you'll see them. You get a bunch of new guys, and you're like, hey, look, it's growing. And then the next week, they're all gone, and it's just back.
Right. Well, I typically scale down my cash play from there. Right. Yeah. Well, the first month of the NFL season for cash games is like, to me, that's the easiest. That's literally the easiest month of the entire year.
Yeah, and that's why I play all the niche stuff, because like I play EuroLeague basketball, I do those Madden streams. In the summer, I'll do Summer League NBA. I'll do, I guess, hopefully the Olympics run this year. I'll do that.
The Euro soccer's coming up on the 12th of July, June.
See, like, I'm sure you don't need me to tell you to play that, but like, I guess like, that's not even that much smaller than like the other leagues, right? It's not like the
Euros are the international. It's like the World Cup for Europe.
Oh, okay, sorry, yeah.
So the first play, they have $100,000 the first for the 12th on the first GPP.
That's actually pretty big. I didn't realize it got that high, but
Right. That's why I
like,
said like. But the thing is, don't you find though in the niche stuff that the specialists are even because I consider the soccer cash lobby to be the hardest lobby in all of DraftKings
yeah,
because it's if you know the sport like you are the best and you're this I'm playing the same people I've played since 2015. I mean
yeah,
like it's like and that's why some people don't play and that's why a lot of people don't play the niche sports in cash games
right,
because if you don't play often enough, I mean seriously in the past we used to have in the soccer lobby Empire Maker would play and Draft Cheat would play, right?
yeah,
And a lot of them, I mean, they were not as good. They
yeah,
weren't bad though, but they just weren't as good. And then
right,
what's the reason for them to play? They look and they see like the people in the soccer lobby are people you don't see in other lobbies. So you would naturally a normal person, a normal user, or someone that's a regular, you'd go in and go, "Who are these people?" I don't
right,
see them right. I don't see Osimo here. I don't see any of these. It's like these are people I've never seen in any other lobby. This must
right,
be easy. And you go, no. These are the people that have made all their money in soccer.
yeah,
Right. You're going against the best of the best for the past 6 years.
yeah.
And
I
then
think
it
so.
turns people off. And then it's like, why right? People I mean, I get blocked. I mean, I'm blocked. I mean, like I can't even get head to head action anymore.
Yeah, I think that soccer,
Does it happen
soccer
in NH? Does that happen in NHL? Are you not getting action there?
in what NHL?
Yeah.
No, I get it. It's soccer and hockey are very similar in that you're playing the same good people every day. Whereas I'm talking like the real niche stuff, like EuroLeague basketball. Like if I post a ton of stuff, I'm lucky to get $500 to $1,000 of action in a slate. Like I'm the only one who plays it. Like the Madden streams, basically I'm the only one who played it for a few months now. A few other guys who play NBA actually started playing it too, so it's not as profitable as it was. But then there's like summer league basketball, the stuff where it's like it's so hard to get good information that like just you know talking about that stuff we did earlier, like the manual work, like reading coach quotes, like really digging and making your own projections well, like I'm extremely confident when I play those niche basketball stuff. Like
Who are you getting action from though in those sports?
you'd be surprised.
Is it just randos?
It's just like like some days I'll get none, and then one day I'll get some random who will just take my high stakes head to head, and they'll play me for a while. Like it reminds me of like old DFS, like playing especially NBA Summer League, like when there's scratches on Twitter, EuroLeague basketball, there's scratches on Twitter in different languages that you have to click translate tweet like 5 minutes before the game starts. Most there's no push alerts for that, and even though soccer's not like huge and it's not huge for DFS, it's still a huge sport. Like when there's news, people are going to find it out. So yeah, the niche stuff is fun if you can like control a lobby and not have any competition. Because I guess the number one thing people will tell me is like, yeah, you can't get action in that. It's not worth your time. But like I played EuroLeague for probably 2 full seasons, and I'm not even kidding. I probably had, I think it was a 60% ROI in 2 seasons of playing EuroLeague basketball because it was just me against fish, like every single slate.
Right, but you had to put in the work for 60% of like $500 to $1,000.
Right. And then the odd time I'd get someone who's just playing me high stakes, but I'd say on average, it's like, especially before the NBA season started this year, since EuroLeague came back earlier, they were actually having like tournaments with like 5 and 10,000 to first, which is huge because now it's like $300 to first 10 men. I'm like, what's even the point of this? Right. So I stopped playing EuroLeague because like you have to enjoy your life a little bit too. If you're just grinding like low stakes stuff all day, just eventually your head starts spinning and it's just not enjoyable.
Yeah, but that's where you started from, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Right. No, you have to start somewhere.
Yeah, if I'm ever on a losing streak, I'll go back and I'll be like, okay, I'm going to play this EuroLeague slate just to get a win, even if it's just like a few $100s. It just feels good to win sometimes. But yeah, there's always an edge in these smaller sports, and I think the coverage and the touts aren't as good, and there's usually like one specialist for it. And even then, like the people who are dominating the lobbies, oftentimes they're just playing the projections, which aren't even that good for that sport. And it's easier to identify errors. There's less, there's no Osimo, there's no Fantasy Labs, whatever site there is, there's like usually one source that gives out quality stuff for these stuff, and sometimes it's not even quality. So I recommend to people, there's so many, like there's Valorum in the lobby. I don't even know what that is. It's like some video game. But like if someone goes and learns it and spends like the next day, they could own the lobby if they wanted to. And I really believe that if they put in the work, because like no one who's playing a ton of NBA, MLB, NHL is going to go sit and learn Valorum to like try and make a few $100s a night, because it's just not worth the time when you're trying to maximize your profit and the other stuff.
Right, which is why when you have a smaller bankroll, it's more worth it to do that.
Exactly. Yeah, I recommend that to people. Like find your niche, and just you can make like good money per month if you just get really good at something. And the nice thing about that is you have to become self-dependent. It's like you can't just go to someone, who's the play today? Like those people who message, like there's no one out to help you. You're on your own in that whole world. So it's
but this is exactly what we did. I mean, yeah. Warren, and you in NHL and me in soccer. I mean, yeah. Most people don't realize now that it's always weird for me when people say, oh, oh, you play DFS soccer? It's like, dude, I was the soccer guy for 2-3 years. I mean, like, I didn't play anything else other than that. And now people are like, you like soccer? It's like, how do you not know me for soccer? But exactly. That's what but Warren, I mean, soccer, the first place contests were like $4,000. Like, that's how I built up my bankroll of going from $400 to 20, 30,000 was soccer. I learned, and there was really no touts for soccer. I'm going to study Saramex and old tees and Pew's lineup. I'm just going to study lineups and, okay. Then you get addicted to set piece takers. And you go on that and you go look at goal scoring odds, and it's like, okay, now I learned the cash construction for soccer, and then you see, once you learn it, then you start seeing people making tons of mistakes in cash games, and you're like, okay, I'm going to target the head-to-heads, and you start building, yourself from there, and then you get to a point where doing the short slates, the 2-game slates, the midweek stuff, and it's like there's more money to be made in NBA, there's more money to be made in MLB than these slates where if I post head-to-heads, the only people that'll take my action will be the other sharp people that you just end up not playing that sport as much anymore.
Yeah, so like I definitely recommend to people, like, instead of, if you're playing like, I don't know, $50 to $100, I would really recommend learning niche stuff and just trying to become the expert at it. Because like there's new stuff in the lobby every day. There's Counter-Strike, there's Call of Duty. Like I messed around with those because we're in the middle of COVID. There's not much else to do. But like I know I was not nearly as good as some of the people who were playing in that, who might just be like esports people and they don't know anything about other stuff, but like there's still like a lobby that can be dominated in that. And if you look in that lobby and look at the head-to-heads, like it'll go up to like $200, but there's no one posting the high stakes stuff, and like that could be whoever's listening to this. You can go and learn something and become an expert at it and just keep going the extra mile, and you never know where you could become that, like you're the soccer guy, someone else could become the Call of Duty guy or something. And I think there actually is a guy, I think his name is Carson something, and I played him a few times and he beat me, and I was like, wow, he has like the perfect team, and I didn't know enough to learn from it because I don't really understand what I'm doing in that. But I was curious to see if he was good or not. Like I was using basic stats, and yeah, I think that whatever new sport there is, if you're watching this, just go and watch it, try and figure it out, and you never know where it will take you.
So they should dominate or die.
Exactly.
Dominate or die.
Yeah, just be the big fish in a little sea instead of being a little fish in a big sea. It's easier to last longer.
Well, sometimes they end up still being the fish in the fish, no matter what.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, but at that point, there probably would have been a fish on MLB and other stuff as well. But you never know.
Do people consider you a big fish in the NHL waters?
I mean, I play. Okay, I wasn't playing NHL for a long time, and then I got in. I told you about this. I got into like a head-to-head battle with Systema because even though I'll give him credit. I'm not going to be one of those scammers. Look at my screenshot. Look how good I am. Like he beat me pretty good, and I still to this day don't agree with the lineup structure he had. But like I'm also not like going to be a sore loser about it at this point. Like he beat me. Like his way clearly worked. I mean, he beat me by less than a point, probably like 4 nights in a row. But like, I think that people do take my games in the NHL, and I don't think I'm as good at NHL as I am other stuff. But yeah, no, I'm not good at lying or pretending like I'm doing well at something if I'm not. Like NBA, like I'll die on that hill. But in NHL, like I think people, when I post, people will take my games. So I guess that tells me something. But
Right.
It still was my first sport, and I used to be before it was infested with sharks, as I call it. I used to really do well in the Draft Street lobby, and I remember I made like the Draft Street finals, and it was like 10,000 to first or something. And at that time, that was like a huge deal. Like I couldn't sleep the night before. I was so excited. And but yeah, it's grown, and there's like a lot of regulars in that. It's similar to soccer in the sense that there's like 4 or 5 guys dominating the head-to-head lobby, and they all have very similar strategies. And I thought my way could work. I still think it could in the future. You never know. I may dive back in, but yeah, it's definitely an interesting sport. And with the scoring changes, I definitely just prefer basketball at this point.
Well, maybe I should start playing NHL then.
Maybe. I mean,
start taking your games.
You should.
And play punt defenseman.
Yep. Oh yeah. That's the strategy is they pay up for like, the 3 big scorers, which is good. And even at the end, I started doing that, and I would pick value guys I like better. But like, I guess the block shot, I was underrating the median of the block shot bonus, and I guess they're doing similar to what you might do. And other stuff is just playing like the highest median, even if there's no ceiling to it, just like basically daring me to pick guys who are going to score goals for cheap prices at forwards. And
right. Well,
that's did it.
That's the I mean, you're describing my soccer's cash strategy in the past of like, like I would play cash lineups where what if I just took off goals off the slate, what lineup would win? And it's like that's that line, and then you have to chase me down. Good luck getting your goals, because they could come from anywhere. And it's soccer; there may only be 3 goals on the whole fucking slate. So, good luck getting them.
I honestly do similar in NHL. Like I always try and take guys with high shot on net floors, but it is highly variance. So like I'm curious how I would do for a full season against these guys. But like at this point, when you have a rough week against it, you're just like, you know what, I'm just going to go back to what was making me money. And the reason I switched to NHL is because the NBA was just it's exhausting. Like, for the work I do, I'm not efficient at all. Like I put in a lot of extra time. I don't like automation. I like to double and triple check everything. So NHL is just like a breath of fresh air. Like I could set my team, do my research, don't have to refresh Fantasy Labs, export a CSV 5 times a night. So that was refreshing in that sense. But like after a while, I was like, all right, I'm ready to go back to basketball. But if there's ever a lockdown, or not a lockdown, a lockout, I'm so used to the COVID word. But yeah, if there's ever a lockout in NBA, I'd definitely go back to NHL and give it another go.
Well, people could follow you on Twitter, WJ Kosoy.
Yep, that's the one.
Right. Bills fan 777 to add to your block list on DraftKings, right? If you want, or not. If you're not going to play overlapping lineups or anything like that, maybe they would join the 3-mans in the NBA lobby.
Yeah, I'm pretty transparent about it. Like I don't play today in NBA. I've already seen I made a mistake. Like I used someone who no one else has. And it's not looking great so far. So I keep looking up. But
right, you're sweating the games. You're not like me. I barely even watch the games.
Yeah, but the nice thing about it is that like I know I'm going to have 3 or 4 other different guys. I'm not dead. If it was a one-off, then I would be dead. But that's pretty much how I play. So if you think your projections are good, I'm always happy to play people, and I'm always in the lobby posting stuff. So I'm sure people will see me around in there. And
right, because a lot of times people will challenge you. I'll get messages. I'll get DMs. You think you're good? I'll play you in a head-to-head. I'm posting it's public. Just fucking take one. You don't have to message me. Just like if I'm playing, take a fucking I post. Like what the fuck? Like I'm gonna send you an invite. Why? I have 109 head-to-head right in the lobby, right to go. Take it.
Yeah, exactly.
Do whatever the fuck you want. Right? So, what do I care?
It creates some sort of personal rivalry for them, I guess.
I don't know.
Like I always get notifications like so and so has challenged you to X amount head to head, and then they'll like write a message like rematch. I got you this time or something.
But you're posted. But I can understand if you're not posted in the lobby. But if you're posted,
Yeah,
just fucking take it.
exactly.
It's
Right.
there. Why do you have to tell me? Just fucking take it.
Exactly. No, I agree.
And then a lot of times people don't realize that you're playing so many head to heads. I'm not keeping track of fucking your fucking $5 head to head.
Oh yeah, I'll get messages on Twitter sometimes like, "Man, great head to head today. Just narrowly beat you out." I'm like, "Oh, we played," and they'll post it's like a $10 head to head or something.
Right.
It's kind of cool though if like someone's like following your head to head and it's like their big thrill tonight, like to try and beat you or something, and then I don't even know what's happening.
Right. It's just like, okay, you're one of 78 that I played today. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know. I'm playing the same lineup. I don't. The only time that I'm not, I'll go into the higher stake stuff and, for blocking and late swap and stuff like that. Right.
Yeah.
But because some people have called me out on that. They said
Mhm.
you talk about doing the late swap so you're not blocked. We both had the same last player and you didn't change and I won automatically. Like what? Like dude, it's NFL. I'm playing 300 head to heads. And like
Yeah,
I'm not going into my $5 I'm sorry. It's just not I don't have the time to go to my $5 head. I'll go into my 109, 215, 109s, 50s.
yeah,
Right? But the $5 ones, like I'm done. I'm sorry.
exactly.
If I'm inefficient by doing that and I'm losing ed, okay, I lost that. I have to prioritize
Yeah,
something, right?
yeah, it's just too much work at that point to like like I'll go through like all my probably like up to 109 and I'll look through it, and then below that it's like if you're playing 20 head to heads, I just don't have the time to click each one because like
You're
that's
doing other
another.
shit.
Yeah, it's just even when I'm locked in my house, like even then, there's things I'd rather be doing than going through that, and it's probably dumb. You could even like probably create a job from it for like someone like go through all my head to head, see if I'm blocked, and just pay them like a certain percent. But I haven't gotten to that point yet. But I'm sure I'm
Even
sure
the
that
enter contest, I need someone to do that for me.
yeah, I've heard that like some of the top players they'll actually pay people like $20 join all my contests. I don't want to do it, and
Right,
they'll
to just
just
go in and just add all the 50/50s and as they populate on FanDuel or something like
yeah
that.
keep joining. See any new head to heads, join them, and like they get paid like this is what I've heard like secondhand from a secondhand thing. So it's like my cousin's brothers, sisters said this or something. But no, I've heard that people actually will do that and they'll pay people to just join the contests while they're doing other stuff. Like who knows, maybe doing the research for the slate because it takes a long time sometimes to join these things. Like you're trying to look at who's in each contest. You can't just click add one to all. It'd be nice
Unless
to
you're Empire Maker, because he'll just do that.
yeah. At that point, you don't have to pay anyone. It's just one button.
Right.
But
He doesn't give a fuck.
yeah, exactly. He's probably thinking it. Even if I'm spending 20,000 extra, it's not worth the time to like save 20,000 to like spend 20 minutes clicking
Right.
and not clicking every single thing. It's like paying $20,000 just for the convenience of doing one click. That's probably how he thinks about it. But hopefully one day I'll reach that point because that would be pretty funny.
Well, thanks for coming on. Was this enjoyable? Was this fun? You
Well,
better than lockdown in Canada?
absolutely. It made me forget that I can't go outside for the rest of the week still. But I always enjoy talking DFS and can't wait to watch this when it's live.
Okay.
Do you ever re-listen to your show or no?
Once in a while.
Yeah, it's good. I don't always love hearing my own voice. I don't think a lot of people don't, but
I
it's
do
good to
so
go.
much shit. What am I? I'd be listening to myself all day. I
Yeah,
talk enough as it is.
yeah, we all have the voice inside our head too, and we're not even talking,
Right.
just saying the same things that we're saying out loud right now.
Right. Just
But
play
yeah,
whoever you want. Listen to whoever you want.
exactly. No, it was definitely fun. I'm glad that you had me on, and down to do it again in the future.
Okay. So Warren Kosoy, WJ Kosoy on Twitter, Bills fan
Yeah,
777 on DraftKings and fantasy platforms. On Blender HD, as usual, on Twitter. Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports. Go pick it up. 15-hour audio DFS masterclass at theoryofdfs.com.